This story happened a long time ago. The story of a human king who opened the gate that connects his world with another. After this happened, people fled in fear. They were filled with fear of the magical creatures that were crawling out of the opened gates. The world beyond them turned out to be the abode of demons which filled it. Countless demons continued to linger, and the previously quiet and peaceful world turned into chaos. Many people died, and the ground beneath their feet turned red. The king of men began to pray to God, asking him to send down the power to destroy these devilish creatures. Then a blinding light fell from the sky. The monsters under this light dispersed into black smoke. Some people received a special mark and gained magical abilities that allowed them to fight terrifying monsters. Other people called them magicians and began to revere them, and peace reigned in their lands again. However, the question remains, is it really the one who fulfilled the king's wish? Was God? The sounds of music came from the palace. A lot of people gathered there for the ball. The beautiful girl capriciously stated that she thought there would be magicians here. If she had known that only nobles would be here, she would not have come. The maid called the girl Miss Siren and said that there was talk of a possible appearance of the dark magician. Siren said that she would then sing only one song and then leave immediately. The maid reminded that an alarm had been issued in the lupine forest due to monsters, and that a caravan passing through the forest had been seriously damaged. Serene was outraged that after this the nobles continued to celebrate calmly. She thought that she would like to meet the dark mage. The audience eagerly awaited the performance of singer Siren. Many of them had heard that she had a truly angelic voice. Serene looked at the faces of the audience in surprise. She hadn't even started singing yet, and the horror was already reflected on their faces. Monsters appeared in the hall windows behind Serena, and the audience ran away in fear. Serene looked at the approaching monsters in amazement. She couldn't understand what it was. A stranger's figure suddenly appeared in front of Siren. He protected her from attacks with his body, and he rushed at the monsters. This stranger was a rather handsome young man in black. The monsters continued to try to get into the hall through the windows, but they were destroyed by the young man in black. The monsters' blood splattered in all directions and landed on Serena's faces. The maid ran up to Siren, and she asked if everything was okay with her. Serene said that the man was definitely from Opian, the same one. Dark magician. She told the maid that he was the dark magician. The maid tried to calm her down and said that she needed to be taken to a safe place first. The public was stunned to hear about the dark mage. Someone said that he was a celebrity from a place called Opian. They say that on that day he saved many lives. The dark magician saw Serene and approached her. O asked if she was hurt. Serene replied that she was perfectly fine. The dark mage said that he was glad to hear it and that in this case, although now is not quite the right time. Can he ask for a favor? Serene replied that of course she would do anything. The dark magician said that then, maybe he can get her autograph. He handed her a piece of paper and a pen and asked for an autograph and her name. Opion? The dark magician walked down the corridor. People around him whispered in surprise upon seeing him and tried to talk to him. At the same time, the dark mage himself could not shake the thought of how much he hated places where there were a lot of people. That's why he didn't want to appear here in this uniform. Suddenly, a female voice addressed him, calling him by name. Blow. It was the pretty girl Ren who asked him what he was doing at the main gate at this hour. He came to submit a mission report to the master. The dark magician answered in the affirmative and added that the job was not a pleasant one. Ren said she was glad he finally made it. Blow noticed some documents in her hands and asked what they were. Ren replied that it was nothing special and hurried away, saying that the master was in his office and suggesting that they have lunch together later. As she was leaving, she dropped some document. Blow picked up the paper and called out to Ren, but then his gaze stopped on the contents of the sheet of paper. It was an intrusive advertisement for the services of a black magician. Ren was horrified that Blow saw what was written there, and he asked if it was the master's doing. She said it was supposed to remain a secret, and she tried to justify herself by saying that she was absolutely against it. But the master decided so. Ren wanted to say something else, but Blow had already left. The man in the office stood opposite the window. He was enjoying a drink in the good weather when the dark mage burst into his office. He was outraged that someone was opening the door as if they were going to knock it off its hinges and received a piece of paper in his face. Blow asked what it was, referring to the document. The master was delighted to see that it was Blow who had arrived, and said that he had been waiting for him. The dark magician was irritated. He pointed at the piece of paper and demanded to know what it was. The master quickly tore the sheet into small pieces. And then Blow innocently declared that he didn't even know what he wanted to show him. Blow was indignant and stated that he had already been given no peace lately. Wherever he appears, he's overwhelmed by a crowd. He first asked to come in this form and then does something similar. The master said mockingly that the star Blow turned out to be a shy person. Blow finally lost his temper and slammed his palm on the table. The master even shuddered in surprise. Then his face brightened, and he happily said that Blow had finally managed to get an autograph from Serena. Blow said that this was the last time and no more absurd assignments under the guise of missions. The master said that it was impossible. There are important tasks here that only he can handle: finding Elan's lost puppy, delivering Rowan's love letter. The master claimed that he managed to get an autograph, and Seren is said to not communicate with strangers due to her difficult character. Blow said he didn't notice anything odd, although she seemed agitated by the attack, which alarmed the master. He said that the Ravi area where Seren operates is considered a safe zone, so did they really encounter bandits? Blow replied that monsters attacked. They were not very strong, but it was strange that they appeared in Ravi, which is protected by a tower. The master replied that this was indeed strange, and that this case definitely needed to be investigated. And it's good that even under such conditions he managed to get an autograph. He also asked how long Rudd plans to stay in this form. He replied that thanks to someone's idiotic missions, he had an abundance of magical power. He was once given the name Blow, the Awakened Release. The master noted that Rudd had grown a lot since their last meeting. He chuckled in response like, "Really?" Rudd stated that since he brought an autograph, he should now give him a normal mission. The master said that since that day, magicians have been watching Rudd, and Schick from the association is especially actively looking for him. He added that the situation would soon become much more dangerous, and this worried him. Rudd asked if these were the words the man who created this was saying, and showed a leaflet advertising the Dark Mage. Then he said that enough jokes, whether he would give him a new mission or not. The master replied that there was a big deal. An auction where rare and unique items are sold is held once a year. This time, information appeared that a magic stone with a name on it would be put up for auction. That is, it is a magic stone of the highest class. The master said that the problem is that other magicians know about this stone, so this mission could be quite fun. The master looked at one document and thought that he had never been able to show it to Rudd. He would probably have gone into a rage about that. This was a letter about the admission of 15-year-old Ruta Christie to the Helios School of Magic. This time, a lot of people gathered for the auction. The Master of Ceremonies announced that the moment they had all been waiting for had finally arrived. The auction begins. Ren said that there are a lot of people here. Is the magic stone called the Heart of Shajarn really that amazing? Rudd replied that it was now false to meet a high-class magic stone. Ren noted that there were a lot of magicians here, and she slyly asked if the Dark Mage was sure that he could handle it. Rudd said there shouldn't be any problems. They all have their own goals, and he has his own goal. Rudd wondered to himself what the master found funny about this. He remembered asking the master what the mission was. The master replied that someone who had inflicted deep damage on their client would appear at the auction. So he was looking for a vengeance bringer. A certain vile magician has completely destroyed their client's life, and he is looking for well-deserved revenge. The master said that he had made inquiries and found out that the magician was a typical villain who exploited and deceived the weak. He handed Rude a piece of paper that said that Dan Marshall, magical name Cloak, was a third-rank mage who had previously been imprisoned but had received a warning and was released. Rudd expressed hope that the master was not asking to kill him. He replied that he could not simply be allowed to die. Since the auction will feature a high-grade magic stone, many people will gather there. In such a crowd, you will first need to find him and catch him. Rudd asked whether he should be tortured or just have his legs broken, but the master said that after he caught him, he had to pull down his pants. Rudd was indignant when he heard such an order. The master explained that the mage was once a member of the criminal organization Coatl, which was destroyed, but several members managed to escape. Raiden, where the auction is being held, has a strong grudge against Coatl. It is said that members of the Coatl had a tradition of carving a special mark on their legs using Lemon's poison, which could not be removed. And if this mark is revealed in front of a large number of spectators, the revenge will be simply wonderful. Rudd asked what if it was just a rumor, and when he exposed it, there would be no mark there. But the master said that this alone would be excellent revenge. Rudd said he wouldn't do it and tried to leave. But in the end, he gave in and now watched the auction begin. When Ren asked him if he was sure about all this, he replied that he would manage somehow. The little girl marveled at how many people there were and leaned over the railing. The man accompanying her returned her to her place and said that the princess should not play games here. The girl said she had a gut feeling that something interesting was going to happen here and asked what Tessie thought about it. She addressed the young girl standing at the door, but Lady Tessiana was asleep. In the next box sat a young man named Lapis. His interlocutor advised him to concentrate and carefully observe what was happening. There are a lot of magicians gathered here, so something interesting is sure to happen. Lapis agreed with his father. The man with wolf ears addressed a young man named Shik. He reminded him that their mission was to protect the magic stone. It needed to be protected, not destroyed. However, Shik continued to pluck leaves from the branch and ignored him. The man with wolf ears repeated the instructions, but the sheik asked him to be silent. He continued to tear off leaves from the branches. Finally, he cut off the last one. After that, he stood up and said that she would come. Meanwhile, the auction continued. The master of ceremonies announced that it was time for today's main lot. Some of those present may already know about this. This is an incredibly rare and valuable item, the greatest magical stone, filled with the power of the mighty Shajarn. The host presented the highest magical stone, the heart of Shajarn, to the audience. The audience was amazed. The manager noticed the blinding light and great power of the stone and declared that they had a chance to become its owner. Ren asked if he had found the target yet. Rudd replied that he couldn't see it clearly. He explained that the auras of everyone present were mixed up and that perhaps something had changed and he had not come. Then Ren said it was time to start preparing. Rudd pulled the curtain in the box. He said that his name was Blow and activated Awakening. Ren said that this spectacle is mesmerizing. Magicians who can change their appearance can be counted on one hand. She added that as soon as a kid like him, he can become such a handsome young man. Ren asked how his mana was. Rudd, or rather Blow, said that he had more than enough mana. But more importantly, it's already starting. They looked out of the box. The soldiers guarding the auction were confused. The unknown man held a blade to the steward's throat and shouted for everyone to step back. He and his accomplice looked at the magic stone. They declared that the heart of Shajarn was now theirs. Ren remained calm and asked Blow who it was. The guards moved towards the kidnappers and shouted at them to drop their weapons. One of the kidnappers said that they needed to retreat here. To the guards. Suddenly, a powerful sonic boom hit them. The soldiers were unable to move and quickly lost their fighting ability. The magical blow came from some strange object in the kidnapper's hand. After some time, the manager and the guards lay helplessly on the floor. The kidnapper said mockingly that he was so bored that he could not wait any longer. He stated that this is why they are taking this stone and extended his hand towards it. However, someone grabbed his arm and stopped him. It was a man with wolf ears. The kidnapper grinned and asked who he was, and he received a powerful charge of magic in his hand. He glowed behind his injured hand and said that he was a visible mage from the association. Hearing about the association, the crowd began to whisper. Someone remembered that there really was a mage with a tail and ears in the association. It was the association's hunting dog, the Lanost Hound. He chuckled as he heard the conversations in the crowd. He said that they themselves were dogs, and asked what bastard dared call him Hound. One of the kidnappers muttered something about the damn mongrels from the association, and he threw the magical object he was holding in his hands at the man with wolf ears. The object hit him in the back of the head. The kidnappers watched with anticipation to see what would come of it. But the man with the wolf glasses received no visible harm. He glanced sideways at the kidnappers and said it was painful. Ren said in surprise that she thought they had only weaklings, but it turned out they had an ace hidden away. But surprisingly, it turned out to be a magician from the association. Blow told Ren to take a closer look. This man was the same magician who was with him before. Both kidnappers were knocked unconscious. The man with wolf ears addressed the magicians. He warned that if they acted rashly, it would end badly. He added that anyone who touched the magic stone or showed any suspicious intentions would have to deal with him. After this warning, he was about to leave. But suddenly he noticed that the magic stone had disappeared. Someone from the crowd shouted that he was there and pointed to a huge statue. On the head of the statue stood a young man with red hair and held a stone in his hand. It was Shikmuan. He said he felt like he was definitely here. The man with wolf ears could not understand what he was trying to achieve. Shikamun held out the stone and said that if Chernish wanted it, he could try to take it. Otherwise, he will eat it. There was a whisper in the crowd that it was Shikmuan from the association. Ren looked at Blow and said that by Chernish, the guy most likely meant him. Blow responded with silence. Ren said that everything was much more complicated than she thought. If they showed up, they wouldn't get off easy and suggested retreating. But Blow said he wouldn't abandon the mission over a speck of dust. Red dust speck. Ren could only express hope that they would somehow get out of this situation. Someone in the crowd said that they came here for a high-grade stone, but because of Shikmuan, the chances of getting it disappeared. He said that there are few magicians here. Maybe it's worth attacking them all at once. but they answered him that they were all on a different level compared to Shikmuan, except that Chernish could resist him. Meanwhile, Shikmuan continued to stand with the stone on the head of the statue and the stone in his hand. He said it seemed he hadn't succeeded in scaring him. The man with wolf ears shouted at him to stop fooling around. Suddenly, a powerful magical force fell upon the statue. The man with wolf ears and Shikmuan looked at each other in surprise. A crack ran across the statue, and she began to fall with Shikmuan standing on her. The man with wolf ears screamed what was happening, but the statue had already collapsed. As the dust from her fall began to clear, a figure appeared. It was Lady Tessiana. The man with wolf ears asked if this was her doing. Lady Tessiana replied that she had come here to participate fairly in the auction, and she even brought one silver one. Then she looked at Shikmun, and she stated that he had interfered with her, but he objected that it was she who was in the way, and he called her a crazy woman. Ren said that this blue-eyed lady appeared out of nowhere, but thanks to her, this matter dragged on and they had a chance. She asked Blow if this was true. He answered in the affirmative. Suddenly, he noticed a man standing in the crowd next to a woman. Earrings were visible in his ear and lip. This was the object of their hunt. Blow said he finally found it. The sounds of battle came from the auction building. Lady Tessiana was fighting Shikmun. The blue-eyed girl was quite serious, and she constantly attacked her opponent. But Shikmun was not going to give up either. He successfully blocked all of his opponent's attacks. Shikmun asked why those who do not know their place dare to come forward. She replied that he wouldn't be able to piss her off and continued to press him. But then Shikmun launched a counterattack, and he threw the girl far down. She hit the floor with a huge bang. The public watched the battle unfold in amazement. From the cloud of dust, the silhouette of a girl rising appeared. She said that her name was Tessiana. Shikmun watched her carefully. The girl used awakening. Shikmun asked if she really thought anything would change if she woke up. The girl replied that he should get ready, and she rushed at him again. The princess shouted that Tessie had awakened, and it looked like it would be a stunning sight. But the escort replied that they would have to return, given the behavior of Tessiana, who was supposed to accompany them. He added that they had arrived here secretly and that he would be in trouble if something happened to her. The attendant said that they needed to leave before something worse happened and tried to take the princess away. The situation in the crowd was quickly approaching panic. There were shouts that people needed to evacuate. The situation escalated when a magic stone fell into the crowd. The hunting dog pushed its way through the crowd, pushing people aside. He thought irritably that since Shikmun had decided to fight, he should have handed the stone over to him first. At this time, Blow, trying not to attract attention, walked through the crowd. He followed his target, the man in purple. The people around him were focused on the magic stone. But for him, this commotion was an ideal opportunity. He thought about how to display the emblem on his leg without raising suspicion. Taking off his pants didn't seem like a good idea. While Blow was thinking, a man next to him shouted where the magic stone was and who had taken it. Blow approached him and said that he saw the stone being taken by a guy in purple clothes. He pointed to the man he was chasing and said it looked like he had hidden the stone in his pants. The man rushed towards the man in purple, grabbed him, and demanded that he return the magic stone. Blow thought his plan had worked. However, the man was wounded in the arm and thrown aside. The man in purple drew his sword and asked how they knew he had almost managed to take it. Blow thought that it was definitely he who took the magic stone. The man in purple stated that since he had the stone, he definitely would not give it up. He said his name was Cloak and used awakening. He added that he had the magic stone and he would kill anyone who dared to take it away. The crowd retreated in fear, but then a man appeared out of nowhere and blocked his path. This one was Blow. He pounced on the man in purple, and with a few blows he disarmed the enemy. A spear appeared in his hands and he pointed it at Cloak's face. Blow said it wouldn't be that easy to finish him off. Shikmun watched what was happening carefully. Just like Lady Tessiana, they both rushed to the scene of the fight. Cloak lay sprawled on the floor. Someone in the crowd exclaimed that it was dark magic. Then it turns out that it was dark magician. Cloak shouted that the magic stone was his and he would not give it to anyone. Blow asked why he thought the stone was his. He also said that he was not interested in the magic stone. He needed something else, and he looked intently at Cloak. Suddenly, an attack was directed towards Blow. He deflected the sword flying at him. Blow watched as a new enemy approached. Suddenly, someone's hand grabbed him by the clothes. It was Shikmun, who said, "Hello, Blackie." Blow and Shikmun glared at each other. The shockwave from their collision spread throughout the hall. The crowd began to scatter in horror. Lady Tessiana was recovering from the fight. She said it was quite painful. In addition, she lost her sword. Tessiana pulled herself together, and she said that next time she will not lose. Cloak tried his best to escape. The crowd chased him, shouting that he had the magic stone. Cloak was furious. How dare these damn bugs bother him? Weaklings should stand aside. However, one of the spectators caught up with him and asked if he really thought everyone here was weak. He hit him hard. They entered into a fight, and a crowd began to gather around them. Lapis watched the battle between the Dark Mage and Shikmun. He thought that if this continued, the building would collapse. Lapis wanted to turn to his father, but he was not there. He asked Runa where his father was, and she replied that His Excellency had already left. Lapis thought that leaving now would be the safest option, but he really wanted to see the battle of powerful magicians. Ren, meanwhile, was very worried about how it could all end like this. The presence of Shikmuan and the association was their miscalculation, and she also didn't take the magic crystal with her to replenish her power. Ren thought that the longer she delayed, the more disadvantageous Blow would be. So what should she do? Shikmun and Blow stood opposite each other. Blow said he had no intention of fighting him. Shikmun replied, "Oh, really?" Blow stated that he didn't need the magic stone, and wasn't his goal to protect it until the end of the auction. At least that's what his companion claimed. Blow stated that it would therefore be better if each of them minded their own business. He also added that his magic runes looked stupid and advised him to remove them. Shikmuan stated that he didn't care whether he needed the magic stone or not, or whether he knew how long he had been looking for it since that day. Opian hid it as if it were some kind of treasure, but Shikmuan took on any tasks and missions where there was a chance to meet it. Blow thought he'd been busy with other things lately, like getting autographs or pulling down his pants. Shikmun declared that he was now right in front of him and rushed at Blow. They collided again. Shikmuan said he wanted him to show him again. That moment. The picture that gave him goosebumps. Before he does. "We'll kill him." Shards of glass fell from the ceiling. Someone shouted that the building was collapsing. The Hound Lacoste made his way to the place of their fight. Is this sheik really going to destroy everything here to the ground? He is too excited about what is happening. Lacoste thought that the auction had already been cancelled, but if he managed to get the magic stone back, it would be an excuse. Meanwhile, Cloak was surrounded by people. They demanded that he return the magic stone. Cloak tried to break through and fought back with magical blows. The man Blow had spoken to earlier shouted that he had a magic stone in his pants. Cloak tried to explain that this was complete nonsense, but the crowd was moving towards him menacingly. He shouted that this was not so and that they should not come near him. Suddenly, Blow disappeared. All that was left in Shikmuan's hands was a scrap of his cloak. Blow appeared in one of the boxes. The girls who were there looked at him with fear. He said that it was getting very dangerous here and that they had better leave quickly. The girls followed his advice. Blow thought that some kind of nonsense was happening. Why should he waste his magical power on a pointless battle? He remembered that since that day, Master had only given him strange missions. Could it be because of that guy? Almost the entire public has already left the auction building, although the mission has practically failed. He still needs to make sure if that mark is there. Shikmuan said that since the Dark Mage had no intention of fighting, he would have to give it to him. There are too many distractions here. When he gets through this garbage, someone's going to have to change their mind. Suddenly, threatening sounds were heard from above. Under the influence of magical runes, the roof of the building began to collapse. Cloak saw that the ceiling could no longer support it. He shouted to the people pursuing him that they had better look up. He thought that if he kept running, he had a chance. But then Blow knocked him off his feet with a magical blow, and he told the remaining audience that it was time for them to leave. Life is much more valuable than a magic crystal, so they all better leave this place. Blow said the building could collapse at any moment. Lacoste shouted at Shikmun to stop immediately. There are still people here? Is he really going to kill everyone here? Ren thought with irritation that there was a complete mess going on here now. She decided to quickly find Blow and then use the teleportation scroll to get out of here. She felt a little uneasy about what was happening. The Dark Mage stood in front of the fallen Cloak. He said that the Dark Mage turned out to be an asshole. He sent people away from here in order to pocket the magic stone for himself. Blow responded to this by saying that everyone measures people by themselves. O asked Cloak of Coatla if he was. He said that it was nonsense and that he had nothing to do with Coatl. Blow said that he should have a mark on his leg and that he was still trying to somehow make a living in Raiden. He added that, judging by the reaction, it was true, but he would have to check everything himself. Cloak shouted for him to stop. He said that he would give the magic stone and handed it to him. But then a powerful magical blow fell upon him. Someone's voice said that he was not interested in the magic stone. So what's the point of dealing with this garbage? What's the fun in it? Shikmun stood in front of Blow, holding a magic stone in his hands. Blow suggested trying to talk first, but Shikmuan was adamant and rushed at him. He grabbed him by the leg and threw it far to the side. Shikmun invited Blow to play with him. Blow landed nearby. He thought this guy was too serious. It looks like a fight is unavoidable. The opponents began to prepare for an attack. Suddenly, Blow felt that the magic he had gathered was gone. Shikmuan also realized that something was wrong. Lacoste ran up to them and looked around in surprise. Strange magic circles appeared on the floor of the hall. The audience in the hall became alarmed. No one could understand why magic circles appeared here. Some strange crystals appeared in the circles, and then monsters started crawling out of them. The crowd began to scatter in fear. Runa followed her young master. Lapis asked her where these monsters came from, and she replied that they crawled out of the magic circles. Monsters began to attack people. Lapis demanded that Runa give him the sword. He said that his skills might of course not be enough, but it's better to fight than just stand here like an idiot. Lapis stood in front of the people who were attacked by the monster and told them not to worry. But then he was thrown far to the side by a powerful blow from the monster. Runa rushed to his aid, and she caught the young gentleman in time. The rune landed softly with him on the floor. She wondered what the monster that had appeared was. An ugly jellyfish or a giant octopus. She summoned a magical bow, and she took aim at the monster. Lacoste shouted, "What was this? Are these really summoning circles?" Lacoste looked at the dark mage in surprise and said that it looked like it. Blow asked if there were magicians who could summon monsters. Lacoste replied that he had never heard of such a thing. The dark mage said that summoning so many monsters, especially in such a place, looked rather strange. Ren ran up to them and Blow asked her why she hadn't left yet. Ren was indignant and declared that she was not going to leave alone like some kind of coward. Lacoste looked at her and wondered who this girl was. Apparently his colleague from Opian, although she didn't look like a magician. He called Shikmuan. He appeared immediately, along with stones falling from the ceiling. Lacoste asked what happened to the magic stone. Shikmuan said that the stone was no longer there. He disappeared. Ren told Blow that they needed to get out of this crazy place, and she would use a teleportation scroll to do so. Blow wanted to object, but then Shikmuan declared that he would not let him leave. He screamed that no one had given him such a right and attacked Blow. Ren was outraged by what he was doing in such a situation, and she demanded that Lacoste stop his comrade. Blow suddenly said that the magic had not disappeared. Apparently, it was a temporary phenomenon. He asked Shikmuan if he felt anything strange. He replied that he had also noticed the loss of magic and did not think that it was his doing, that something was wrong, especially since monsters had appeared. Blow said that now was not the right time for them to fight, but Shikmuan replied that he didn't care, and he pounced on Blow again. He directed a powerful magical attack at him. Ren was horrified. However, Lacoste stood in front of the dark mage and took the blow himself. He told Shikmuan to calm down. Overly persistent guys are really off-putting. Ren stated that now, because of all this fuss, the Tower of Mages would swarm here like flies, and they had agreed to try to avoid them. Blow said that Lacoste had taken the hit so easily that they should just leave. But Shikmuan wasn't going to let him go just like that. He told Lacoste that he would not spare anyone who stood in his way. Blow wondered if this guy was serious. Ren reminded them that if the mages from the tower arrived, it would be a big expense, so they needed to leave quickly. Blow shouted to her that there was danger behind her. Ren turned around and saw Lapis with a sword in his hand. He attacked the monster that had snuck up on her from behind. Lapis called out if she was okay. Ren looked at him in surprise. She thought it was she who should ask if he was okay. Runa asked if she should help the young master. Meanwhile, Lapis was thrown back by the monster's blow. Blow killed the monster with one blow and asked Ren how she was. He said it was a low-level monster with no core or intelligence. Runa approached Lapis and asked if he was okay. He looked at Ren and Blow and said that this was the Dark Mage, and that guy is Shikmuan. These are the most powerful magicians. Blow looked at Cloak lying among the rocks. He thought he wasn't finished with the confirmation yet. Ren yelled at him to forget about this damn mission already. She felt like it was going to be a bad day after the bad sleep she had. It's a good thing she took that scroll with her. Blow said it would be best for her to leave first, but she indignantly asked if he really wanted to pull down his pants. Lapis and Runa were dumbfounded when they heard their conversation about pants. Blow said that there were still monsters and people here, but Ren replied that the tower would handle all of this. It was entirely their job. She called Lapis, and she said that although it would be an exaggeration to say that he helped them a lot, but wouldn't they like to leave with them? Lapis thought about it and Ren said that if he doesn't want to, but he immediately agreed and said that they would be very grateful for the help. Lacoste said he had a splitting headache and thought he was getting a migraine just thinking about having to write a report about it. He blamed Shikmuan, who was dragging him along, for everything that happened. Ren said, "The destination is where I want. The condition is contact." Blow explained that they needed to grab. Lapis looked at the approaching Shikmun with concern. He asked why he was running away and where that former self-confident bastard had gone. Lapis looked at him with concern and told Blow that the mage was staring at him like he wanted to kill them all. He replied that there was no need to worry. He must have been having a staring contest with himself. He urged Ren to hurry, but she asked him not to distract her as she needed to concentrate. Shikmuan shouted that he really thought he would let him go so easily. "Damn, Churnish!" Suddenly, the magic circle on the ceiling of the building began to glow fiercely. Lacoste shouted, "Whatever." Lapis said it was the same. Blow urged Ren again. She concentrated, and finally activated teleport. A powerful explosion rocked the auction building. A magic circle landed on someone's palm, and was crushed by this hand. A man with slit pupils and a small monster on his shoulder said it was quite fascinating. He asked his interlocutor if she agreed with him. His companion, a girl with small horns whom he called Mistress Ruby Montier, sat nearby with a magic stone in her hand. She said there was nothing interesting here, to put on such a show for such a trifle, and she crushed the magic stone in her hand. Ruby Montier said contemptuously that humans were worthless creatures. The master's office in Opian. The master said that the auction building was destroyed, the magic stone was missing, and an unknown monster appeared. He added that it was a really funny sight and laughed. Ren said that he sent them to take off the mage's pants and they got into such trouble it must have been really funny. The master said he was still glad they both returned safe and sound. If he had known that Shikmuan would be there, he would never have sent them there. He wondered why this guy was so fixated on Blow. It seemed like it wasn't just a desire to fight. However, this family has always been a little crazy. Ren was surprised to hear that family was involved. The master said that over time he would lose interest, so for now one should avoid him, even if it was unfair. He added that something was wrong with the case, and he became suspicious when he heard about a high-level magic stone at the auction. The mass summoning of monsters and the disappearance of magical power also cannot be ignored. Ren said that this incident would cause quite a stir in the association and the tower. The master also asked where Rudd had gone after he had thrown this unfinished report on his desk. At this time, Rudd was sitting in the tavern and reading a book. He said that, as expected, there were no records of monster summonings. Then a little boy came up to him with a cup and said that his drink was ready. The boy's name was Ben, and he was distinguished by his green hair. He told Rudu that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, probably because he studied a lot. Ben, looking at the book, said that it was all very complicated. He didn't know that his brother Rude was so smart. Rudd replied that he had only just realized this. He asked that there seemed to be a lot of visitors today. Ben said that there weren't many of them, and everyone was busy talking about the Dark Mage's feat. Rudd made a puzzled face. Ben began to tell that Ravi had an expensive magic stone and a bad magician wanted to steal it. But the Dark Magician appeared and saved everyone. Rudd smiled sheepishly, remembering that the place had been destroyed by an explosion. Ben stated that he hoped his sister would become a powerful mage like the Dark Mage. Rude expressed surprise upon hearing about his sister. Ben explained that she had recently entered Helios School, but it was more than just a school. Helios is a prestigious establishment only for the very outstanding and amazing people. Ben said that he was very sad that he and his sister were not together, but at least he could write her letters. His mother told him not to send her letters too often so as not to distract her, but he had already written 10 letters. Ben said he had to serve other customers and ran away. Rudd listened to the conversations of the people around him. They talked about how Shikmuan won. The Black Mage saved everyone there. Cloak swallowed the magic stone, and even that the Black Mage was a woman. Rudd thought about how many rumors there were and that one guy took all the blame. But for some reason, there is no mention of monsters. Perhaps the tower had a hand in this, because the city was protected by their barrier. Perhaps something happened to their barrier. Rudd thought it was good that he had drawn in detail the magic circle he had seen there. Perhaps it would help in the future. Having finished his drink, he decided that it was time to go to the master. Strange sounds were heard from the roof of the building in Opion. A female voice asked what was happening, Lispin. Lispin replied that there was a bit of a commotion ahead, but there was nothing to worry about. He asked if everything was okay with Mrs. Diner. Ms. Diner replied that everything was fine and there was no need to worry unnecessarily. She added that if she could be of use to this child, she would do everything to make it happen. Rudd walked down the street looking at the piece of paper he was holding in his hand. He thought that just by looking at this magic circle, he would not get answers to his questions. A gust of wind suddenly snatched the paper from his hands, and he dragged him along the pavement. Rudd rushed for the piece of paper. He thought sparsely about how far he was going to fly, pursuing the leaf. The young man shouted for them to give him back immediately. The leader of the gang of suspicious-looking people claimed that he had merely picked up the bag that had been thrown down. The young man tried to explain that he had only put it down for a second, but the leader grabbed him by the collar. The leader said he would have thought about it if he had been begged, but he shouted instead. He told him to think carefully whether he would die first or the guards would come running. Then a piece of paper hit him in the face and he threw it away in irritation. The leader added that in any case, the bag was now his and he had better get out of here quickly. Picking up the piece of paper, Rudd said sadly that it was dirty. The bag that had been the subject of the argument was hanging on his arm. The leader shouted irritably, asking what kind of kid this was. Rudd meanwhile returned the bag to its owner. The bandits shouted at him to give the bag back, but Rudd said he had picked it up too and politely asked them to leave. The young man quickly ran away with his bag. The leader said threateningly that since this little bastard had ruined everything, he needed to be taught a good lesson. He ordered his accomplices to block the exits. Rude determined that he was facing a weak, low-class power-type mage. The leader said that he seemed unfamiliar with how this world worked, so he needed to be taught a great lesson. Rudd decided that it was not worth getting into trouble and it would be better to just run away. He rushed forward, and under the surprised glances of the bandits, jumped off the roof. At this time, a carriage was passing below. Mrs. Diner heard some noise from above. It was Rudd, which landed right on the roof of her carriage. Rudd thought with relief that the carriage was quite sturdy. He jumped off her onto the ground and ran. The people accompanying the carriage looked after him in surprise. One of the riders shouted what it was and called for Sir Lispin. Rudd heard someone tell him to stay put and felt a blade at his neck. He thought that this man was quite fast. Sir Lipson asked if he knew whose carriage he had just stepped on. Rudd replied that he didn't know. He bowed politely and said that he asked for forgiveness. He could not imagine that some nobleman was riding in it. Although there were unavoidable circumstances, he should not have done so, and he sincerely apologizes for the inconvenience caused. Now he will be careful, so they could not forgive him just this once. A little surprised, Sir Lipson answered okay. Rudd thanked him again and ran away. One of the attendants laughed and noted how sincerely he apologized, and asked Lipson why he raised his sword against the child. He asked in response if he really thought this was an ordinary child. He landed perfectly despite falling from such a height. This cannot be considered a simple child. The interlocutor said that Lipson himself had not taken part in the hunt for middle-class monsters. This boy seems to have a promising future ahead of him. Maybe he should take the opportunity and take him on as an apprentice. Mrs. Diner watched their conversation closely. She noticed that this child seemed strong and smart. Lipson's partner said that since the lady also thought so, maybe they should bring him here and recruit him into their squad. But under Lipson's stern gaze, he finally calmed down. Sir Lipson expressed hope that Miss Diner was not injured in the collision. She said she was fine, but since they were already close to their destination and the weather was fine, she would like to walk a little. Sir Lipson replied that it was as the lady wished. And then they went on foot. Rudd, who was watching them, thought that this lady really was an aristocrat. And that man with her is quite capable. Be that as it may, it's good that he just let him go. Rudd thought that luck had not been on his side lately, and in any case, he would not meet them again. Mrs. Diner sat on the sofa smiling sweetly. Sir Lipson and his partner stood behind her. They were in the master's office, and the master himself and Rudd were sitting opposite. Rudd said that he should probably leave, but the master stopped him and said that he should stay and listen. Mrs. Diner asked if this was the same child. The master replied that although he looked small and inconspicuous, he was one of Opion's greatest talents. Ms. Diner said that since he belongs to Opion, he must be an official magician. The master explained that despite the fact that he had recently become a 7th grade mage, he was the best among his peers. There must be a lot of hidden talents in Opion. Even on the street there are rumors about the dark mage. They say that he is incredibly talented. Since she was here, she would like to meet the subject of these rumors. The master said with a sweet smile that he was sorry, but the dark mage was currently on a mission. Mrs. Diner said that if that was the case, then nothing could be done. She noticed that she had strayed a little from the task at hand, and she told Rudu that they would see each other again. Master and Rude stared at her in bewilderment. She explained that he had not seen her, but that she was the owner of the carriage he had fallen on. In response to the master's question, Rudd replied that it just happened that way. Ms. Diner said it might be fate. She told Master Opian that this child could be trusted completely. He replied that he was grateful to Duchess Artian for her faith in him. Mrs. Dana was a duchess. Rudd thought that of course he guessed that she was a noble lady, but not a duchess. Duchess Artian said it was time to get down to business. Since she already told Master Opian about this, perhaps he knows about it too. The reason she came here personally is because of her second son, who is now in Helios. The master said, "It turns out he wants to tell the Duchess that the second young gentleman." She confirmed that her second son was having a hard time with school. She gave instructions to the second escort, Fran. He laid out a stack of documents and explained that it contained information on Helios, along with a list of students, as well as a report on the current situation. Rudd thought he had already heard about Helios today. The Duchess said her son had only been admitted to Helios a month ago and she didn't know what had happened, but they were calling him a monster there now. The master was surprised. Who would dare to treat the second young Master Artian like that? The Duchess replied that he was not the only nobleman there, and that after admission, outside interference in the affairs of the school was prohibited. She added that he is a very sensitive child, and from a young age all his love and attention was taken away from him by his older brother. He grew up lonely and withdrawn, and even she couldn't give him the attention he deserved. This child became so fragile, unable to express the pain that he hid. The Duchess said she did not want him to be hurt anymore. And more importantly, she can't allow a member of their family to be treated like that in that place. The Duchess said that her task was very simple. Help him start living a peaceful school life in a place where he is called a monster, protect him. After the Duchess left them, Rudy said he was waiting for an explanation. He explained that he meant this absurd and ridiculous situation. The master, with an innocent smile, said that everything was as he had heard. The Duchess had submitted a request and he would be in charge of fulfilling it. Rude stated that he must be joking. Besides, how could he imagine him in such a way? The master replied that he couldn't say that he was their dark magician. He added that he had nothing to worry about. Helios was an elite school, but all the students were still unawakened students. Rudd asked if he hadn't received a report about the failed mission from Ren, and that he needed to investigate what happened there. The master stated that he would take care of this matter himself, and that he should take care of it on this mission, and handed him the document. This was a letter about Ruta Christie's admission to the Helios School of Magic. Rudd said it had to be a joke. The master tried to explain everything to him, but he simply returned the letter to him. Rudd stated that their relationship was over. "Thank you very much for everything. It was a pleasure working with them, but from now on he is leaving Opian." The master shouted that he had done so much for him, fed him, watered him, did not sleep at night. How could he do this to him? Rudd responded by saying that how could he do that and not say a word to him? He would never agree to go to school. The master declared that this was not a school at all, but a mission. But Rudd replied that he did not want to take on this mission. The master said that doesn't he understand? All he wants is to educate him. Even if it's in this way, this feeling is deeper than the ocean. Rudd felt like he no longer understood what was happening. Then Ren called out to them and asked what they were doing there. The master asked if she could knock before entering. He had an important conversation. Ren said she knocked, and she ordered them to sit down and not to disgrace them in front of the whole district. Rudd asked her if she really knew about it. Ren said that he shouldn't take it so seriously. It's better to treat it as a fun outing. The students there will be like children to him. It's worth taking the opportunity to take a little break, experience school life, and make friends your own age. There is nothing scary about it. Rudd said he didn't need friends. The master said that if Rudd didn't want to deal with it, then so be it. The Duchess herself had made the journey to Opion and entrusted them with the mission. They will simply tell her that they cannot take on this mission, although of course he will not lose his head after this. But if it makes things easier for Rudu, then everything is fine. Ren intervened and said that it was enough to talk nonsense. The master was of course to blame for starting all this without discussing it with him first. He will go to school because he has been officially enrolled there. This may take a long time, so it is up to him to make the decision. Ren asked what he wanted. Rudd said that it turns out he just has to help the Duchess's second son. Ren and Master looked at him incredulously. The master replied that yes, and it wouldn't be too difficult, and Ren declared that he was super. She expected this from their opium star. Rudd asked if the school uniform was ready and if he should start packing, although he thought maybe he should decline. The master explained that he told the Duchess that he was a 7th level mage, but the school did not know that he was an official awakened mage. This means he can't be there below. The master assured him that there would be nothing dangerous there, but he should just be careful with the teachers. They were official magicians after all. He also said that this mission would be a vacation for the dark mage below. But at the same time, this will be Ruta Christie's first mission. Rudd thought that the master had a way with words, and Ren was wondering what clothes she should give him. Meanwhile, Rudd was looking through the information and thinking about how he could help this child. A photograph of a young man with a sinister look caught his eye. Rudd thought he had a rather frightening look. He put the photograph on the table, and he asked if this guy was the instigator of the persecution of the Duke's second son. Ren and Master hesitated a little before answering. Then the Master said that actually this guy, Lidosis Dian Artian, the one who is mocked and called a monster, the second young Master Artian. Post office in Opian. Ben asked the clerk why he couldn't send the letter. He replied that Helios was very strict about accepting things from outside, so they couldn't accept letters without a certificate. The employee also said that if his sister was studying there, she should have a certificate and he should ask his parents for it. Ben said that his mother didn't allow him to send letters and asked if they could just send them. The employee apologized and said that without a certificate he could not help. Rudd suddenly appeared and announced that he had a certificate. He asked that the letters be sent to Helios along with his luggage. Ben looked at him in surprise. Rudd assured him that he could deliver the letters. Helios School of Magic. The school day was beginning. There was talk among the students that that same guy would arrive today. He was the only one who passed the entrance test with honors, and the professors made such a fuss about it at the time. The silver-haired girl thought irritably that it was too noisy here. What an interesting next lesson. The blue-haired student was sleeping on his desk, and someone said that Varys was sleeping again. A girl was showing her friends the jewelry she bought when she got permission to leave. A long-haired young man entered the classroom. Conversations among the students immediately died down. The long-haired student walked across the classroom and sat down in his seat. Everyone watched him silently. Someone quietly said, "Monster?" The silver-haired girl noted with satisfaction that it had finally become quiet. The student with long hair sat silently at his desk. It was Lidorsis Dian Artian. Rudd asked in surprise. The best result on the entrance exams and a chronic illness. The master and Ren nodded affirmatively. Rudd groaned. They were serious. How could he get a perfect score on a test he had never seen? And what kind of disease was this? The master boasted that he was a capable man and said that in the end, everything somehow turned out this way. He said that about a month had passed since the new student started studying, and his invitation also came a month ago. Rudd was supposed to go there back then, but the moment wasn't quite right, and he didn't know it yet. So a plausible excuse was needed to buy time, and it had to be something that the stern Helios would accept. A fragile and at the same time brilliant handsome boy, doesn't that sound fun? Rudd realized that he was being bullied, but there was nowhere to go. Someone's voice calling him Student Christie brought him out of his reverie. The teacher asked him what he was thinking about and told him to follow him, as classes had already begun. Rudd thought that if the certificate of enrollment had arrived a month ago, then the application had been submitted even earlier. This means that the master intended to send him to school even before the mission appeared. So what is he supposed to do here now? Rudd thought that, as expected from a school of magic, there were mana flows everywhere here. In any case, since it has come to this, we just need to quickly complete the mission and return back. The teacher told him that people of different ages and statuses come here, so they don't matter. Rudd asked what was important here then. The teacher solemnly replied that the most important thing here is talent. First-year students usually feel joy when they step into the school, imagining what outstanding magicians they will become. It's as if they've already become magicians. However, this is nothing more than a misconception. Just entering Helios does not mean that they will become official magicians. In fact, many students are unable to overcome their own limits and fall into despair. The teacher asked what about him. He is the first person to score a perfect score on the entrance exam. Rudd replied that if efforts alone are not enough, then he will simply have to drop out. The teacher noted with a laugh that he has a sense of humor. Rudd thought that passing the exam with the highest score was actually more difficult than he had previously thought. The teacher said that Helios is always happy to accept talented students, and he congratulates him from the bottom of his heart. Hellion School specializing in magic, a place filled with those who have the talent to sense and use mana, with the aim of raising them to become true magicians who bear the emblem. Based on ability, students are divided into the advanced class of Herace, middle class, Treasure. The lowest class is Iden. First-year students start in Iden and can progress to the next grade through exams held once a year. The teacher introduced him as Ruta Kisti and said that he was joining their class late due to health problems. He urged the students not to make an outcast of him because he was a little late and to try to get along. Then he asked him to greet the others. Rudd told everyone he was looking forward to working together. The students began to whisper, discussing him. Meanwhile, Rudd glanced around the classroom to find the person who had brought him here. And finally he found it. Here he is, the second son of the Duchy of Artian, a monster who is being mocked. Lidorsis Dien Artian. Rudd wondered why he was sitting there all alone. The teacher offered him to take a free seat. Rudd watched Lidorsis. He didn't look weak or vulnerable, but at the same time he was being bullied and called a monster. He decided that he needed to first understand the situation. There was no need to rush. It was better to just observe first. The student sitting in front turned around and greeted Rudd. He called him a local genius and asked if he really had passed the test with an excellent score, and also asked how old he was. Rudd replied that he was 15. The student stated that he knew he was younger than him and said that he was 17. Then the guy introduced himself and said that his name was Dio Varus. He stated that there was no need for formalities and he could just call him Dio, age was just a number. The teacher said he understood why Dio, who was in last place in the standings, wanted to be friends with Rudd Christie, but he asked to postpone their conversation until the break. Rudd decided that the best thing to do now was just sit down and watch quietly. After the lesson, the students surrounded him and began asking questions and getting to know him. Rudd thought that if it didn't glow, there wouldn't be any problems. But they turned out to be quite curious. They continued to pester him with questions. And they didn't lag behind even while walking. Rudd thought it was probably because it was his first day at school, which was why they were all so outgoing. Dio Varus told everyone to move aside. He had been given an important mission, to give the newcomer a tour of the school. Rudd glanced at the place where Lidorsis sat, and I saw that he had disappeared somewhere. Rudd thought it would be interesting to know where he went. At this point, Dio Varus called him a friend and declared that it was time for them to set out on a journey. And he took him to get acquainted with the school. He said that the school was very big, so at first he might get lost, but after a few days he would get his bearings. He asked if he could just call him Rudd, and he said yes. Dio said that he was extremely nervous when he arrived. It is very difficult to get here unless you are a nobleman. He thought that happiness was beginning. But in fact, nothing changed. He was the last one in the test. Dio said that Rudd is incredible. If he was the first to pass the test with an A, he is the complete opposite. Rudd said Dio is amazing too. Of all the students, he managed to get to the very end, which is impressive. Not everyone can do that. Dio froze in amazement. He asked Rudd not to say such things with such a serious face. This is where they will spend most of their time. This is the Central Library of Helios. It's huge, and there are a whole bunch of books here. Above the students of the Manosphere, they maintain a soundproofing spell. You can fully concentrate on the book. Rudd thought the cost of all this must be significant. The library has 4 floors, but now only the first one is accessible to them, the lot of the lower class. Suddenly, someone called out to Dio, calling him the blue-haired, gloomy-faced man. A student asked him if he was in Professor Hale's class. Dio replied that yes, that was correct. This student had a Carice symbol on his sleeve. Rudd thought he was probably from an advanced class. A student asked how the monster from their class was doing. Dio replied that he was fine. The student said it was a pity. Then he said that they could return to their business and left. Dio said that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Rudd asked why he was so nervous, just because he was from the advanced class. Dio replied that Rudd apparently had not yet experienced a true hierarchical society. He said that he would grant him sacred knowledge to help him survive the difficult existence in Helios. Rule number 1 is never to cross an advanced class of Herais. They are the chosen ones, possessing exceptional talent and skills, and are recognized by the school. There are less than 20 of them, but their skills are comparable to 100 Idens, so their privileges are equal to their abilities. One mistake and his peaceful life will end that day. They are the elite among the students. For the commoners, they are like stars in the sky. Rudd asked, "What is the second rule then?" Dio whispered in his ear that the second rule was to be wary of a student named Shebil von Hadelio. He explained that it was the blonde man he had just seen. You should be wary of him. It's better to avoid meeting him if you notice him. They are talented, of course, but they have characters. Rudd asked mockingly that the characters must be nasty. Dio hissed at him and told him to be quieter and more serious. He needed to hear that for his own good. Shebil von Hadelio is the heir of the respected Marquis Hadelio, and because of his family, even the professors don't want to associate with him. If he crosses paths with him, he will be hounded until the very end and his life will turn into hell. Rudd said he would be careful and asked why the guy was called a brat. Dio replied that he was a living example of what would happen if you messed with Hadelio. Rudd asked for more details, but he tried to avoid this topic and said that there were still many places ahead that they needed to visit. They visited the central fountain. We went to the magic item shop. We visited many other interesting places. After their hike ended, Rudd decided it was more of an expedition than a tour. Who would have thought that it would take a whole day? Rudd thought that this rascal knew quite a lot, even though he had only been here for a month. Finally, a school employee arrived. She said that his luggage arrived on time, and she said that for now he could stay in a temporary room until they found a roommate for him. Rudd asked if this issue had not been resolved yet. The employee explained that according to the rules, 2 students should share a room, but there were currently no available rooms for his class. Rudd asked if there were any spare rooms left in the school. The employee was surprised, and he explained that he had heard that Lidorsis D and Artian lived alone in a room. Rudd stood in front of the door to his room. He held a key in his hands, and he recalled the employee's reaction to his request. She said that she was putting him in this room only because he asked, and if he changed his mind, he could always come to her. Rudd thought it was quite difficult to persuade her. He decided it was time to meet the main object of the mission and knocked on the door. No one answered him, and he decided that there was no one there. He opened the door and entered the room. The room turned out to be quite large for 2. Lidorsis lay on the bed covered with a blanket. Rudd was surprised that he was sleeping at such a time. He threw back the blanket and saw that Lidorsis was indeed sleeping and quite peacefully. Rudd thought that given the circumstances, he shouldn't sleep so peacefully. He decided that it was time to unpack his things and moved away from the bed. He didn't see Lidorsis staring after him. Night has fallen in Helios. The teacher was walking down the corridor and suddenly heard someone saying that if they continued to call him like that, there would be problems. He needs time to avoid prying eyes in the tower. Then Professor Hale's voice replied that he would definitely fulfill the contract, but he needed a little more time. The teacher ran into Hale's room and asked what happened, but he calmly replied what he meant. The teacher said that there was some kind of shadow here. He definitely saw a black shadow. Suddenly, he felt something strange and turned around in fear. Professor Hale said he would do everything to fulfill the contract. Morning came in Helios. Rudd woke up in his bed. He thought he had slept for quite a long time. As expected, Lidorsis was no longer in the room, his bed neatly made. When he managed to leave, yesterday, no matter how much he tried to talk to him, he pretended to be asleep. Rudd thought that perhaps it was too early to live in the same room with him. He was much more careful than he seemed. Looking out the window, he saw that the courtyard was already busy. It seemed like everyone here got up early. The students were chatting animatedly and talking about him, among other things. He heard that a new student who got a perfect score on the entrance test was now sharing a room with a brat. Moreover, he wanted it himself. Rudd decided that if they were reacting so strongly to the fact that they were neighbors, things were much more serious than he thought. We'll have to take more active action. Suddenly, he saw that a group of students from the K-Dad class were leading Lidorsis somewhere. At the same time, they behaved quite aggressively. Other students saw what was happening, but no one dared to intervene in this situation. Rudd also decided to just observe for now. Lidorsis was pushed so hard that he fell. One of the treasures asked him why he didn't understand what they were saying to him. Spawn like him can't walk down the central aisle. He has to sneak around so as not to catch their eye. Artian's family doesn't seem to be interested in him at all, and his older brother recently said that he doesn't have a younger brother. Doesn't that mean everyone has abandoned him? What a pathetic sight. One of the students said that in any case, it was good that his family was not interested in him and stepped on his hand. Others tried to stop him, but he said that he was just a brat. When else will they get the chance to do this with someone from the ducal family? The student invited his comrades to step on him, but then a book fell right on his head. The blow was quite strong, and he fell, and his friends wondered where the book had fallen from. A voice came from the wall and said that it was his book. It was Rudd. He politely asked for the book to be returned to him. Then Rudd jumped down right on top of them. Lidorsis watched what was happening with surprise. Rudd landed on the second student, clad, and apologized, saying he thought it was the floor. The third student shouted at him to ask what he was doing, but Rudd replied that it was not his place to ask. The student swung his arm in anger and tried to hit, but Rudd easily intercepted the hand. He smiled and told the student that he had hit him first. Lidorsis watched in amazement as Rudd struck back. The student lost consciousness from the blow. As a result, 3 students from the treasure class lay in front of Rudd and Lidorsis. Rudd was surprised to think that he was weaker than he thought, since he hadn't hit that hard. Meanwhile, Lidorsis took advantage of the moment and escaped. Rudd looked at the retreating figure. He tried to detain him by calling him by name, but he told him not to come near him. Rudd didn't stop him. Under the surprised glances of 2 students passing by, Lidorsis ran on. The girls saw the lying students of Clad and rushed to help them. By this time, Rudd had managed to hide. He thought about what Lidorsis had said not to approach him. At the same time, he didn't notice that other students were looking at him strangely. Rudd concluded that Lidorsis reacted differently today than he did yesterday. He wondered where Lidorsis had gone and whether he should have followed him immediately. But then Dio Varus pounced on him and dragged him to a secluded place. When they were alone, Dio asked if it was true that he lived in the same room with the brat. Rudd answered in the affirmative. Dio said dejectedly that he should have explained everything to him yesterday and said that for now he needed to transfer to another room. Rudd asked why. Dio replied that it was necessary for his peaceful life at school. He didn't seem to understand the situation he found himself in. The brat that Chevle was talking about is the younger gentleman from the Ardian family. Rudd said he realized that Chevle von Hadelio was behind it all. He then asked if that justified what was happening to Lidorsis, who was branded a scumbag and ignored by everyone. Lidorsis was hiding nearby at this time and heard their entire conversation. Dio replied that this was not so. Rudd said he thought so too. Then he asked what Lidorsis himself thought about it. Dio looked at him puzzled. Lidorsis came out from behind the boxes. Rudd tried to talk to him. Dio asked how long he had been standing there, but Lidorsis passed by silently. He tried to leave, but tripped over some boxes and fell. Rude wanted to call out to him, but Dio covered his mouth with his hand. He asked what he was trying to achieve by stopping him. Nothing will change anyway, and he might end up in his place. Lidorsis was leaving. Rudd grabbed him by the sleeve and called him by name. He said that perhaps they should talk, but Lidorsis said he didn't need it. He ripped the sleeve from Rude's hand, and he left. Rudd couldn't understand what was wrong with him. Dio asked what was happening to him, what he was trying to talk to him about, and why. He replied that they lived in the same room and asked why they called him a brat. What could have happened in 1 month that everyone started calling him that? When other students saw him, they wondered why he was still studying there. They would have left long ago. They said he was creepy and called him a monster. Little Lidorsis cried bitterly. There was a girl lying at his feet. She was dead. There was an older child standing nearby. He told Lidorsis that he was the cause of her death. Those terrible memories came flooding back to Lidorsis. Dio said thoughtfully that the reason why everyone calls young Master Ardian a brat, he doesn't know it himself. Rude said okay and tried to leave, but Dio stopped him. He said it all started with Chevle. At first everything was fine, but after that incident everyone started calling him a brat. Rudd asked what the incident was. One day, shortly after they entered Helios, many Edens gathered in the library. On that day, the young Master Ardian allegedly turned into a terrible monster there. It was said that he had 3 eyes, his entire body was covered with fur, and his arms were divided into 8 parts. Rude asked what nonsense he was talking about, but Dio replied that he wasn't there himself and was just repeating rumors. Ruth thought it was some kind of nonsense. How could he turn into a monster? In any case, the library was closed for several days then, so something really did happen there. Dio said that Rudu needed to change rooms quickly. Rumors about this had already spread throughout Eden and would soon reach the Harises. Rudd said that today, everyone's reactions were indeed different than yesterday. He asked Dio if he would also avoid him if he didn't change rooms. He looked at him with surprise. Rudd said that he wouldn't do that. He's not one of those people. Dio had no choice but to agree. The two of them walked through the school building under the watchful eyes of those around them. Rude said that it seemed like he was still in the spotlight, to which Dio grimly replied that he didn't want to be in the spotlight. He asked Rudd what he was planning, since he wasn't planning to go against the Koreas. After a short pause, he replied that, of course not. Dio also asked why he was even trying so hard to help young Master Ardian. Rudd replied that it wasn't exactly help, but he thought to himself that it was first and foremost an assignment. When they entered the classroom, Lidorsis was already sitting in his seat. As always, he looked silently at the table. Rudd said that even if nothing changes, if he does nothing, it will be the same as agreeing with this injustice. He remembered the Duchess saying he was a lonely child, and for the sake of this child, who is called a child and who suffers, she is ready to do anything. Entering the classroom, Rude turned to Dio. He said that they were in the same boat with him, Liderus Dian Artian. Even if status is considered unimportant in Helios, the Ardian family is not something to be treated lightly. Rudd said he wanted to move and asked to free up the seat next to Liderus. The students looked at each other in bewilderment. What was he doing, including the girl with silver hair? If he himself had mentioned his family, he would not have found himself in this situation. Then why doesn't he do anything? Rudd thought that this was exactly what he would have to deal with. Now the 3 of them were sitting next to each other, Lidorsis, Rudd, and Dio. According to ancient books left by the kings of the past, Mages are the lions of God, and are also described as great saviors who cleanse corrupted lands and defeat monsters. Today, such fame is no longer entirely appropriate, as there are unworthy, mediocre magicians, those who receive their marks illegally, and strolling. But even despite this, it cannot be said that they are not saviors. Today, only they can stand up to the monsters. During the lecture, the students looked with curiosity at the trio sitting nearby. Among them was a girl with green hair. After the lesson ended, the students continued to cast curious glances at them, but no one approached them. Suddenly, Rudd spoke loudly to Lidorsus. He didn't react in any way and remained silent. Rudd called out loudly again to the whole class, "Hey, Lidorsus!" Suddenly, Dio told him that he was hungry and suggested that they have lunch together. They left. Lidorsus remained sitting in the classroom. Over lunch, Doi suggested that Rudu think it over again. He said that the two of them wouldn't change anything anyway. Besides, if the person himself is indifferent to everything, why should they interfere? He doesn't care whether they are nearby or not. Rudd replied that he didn't think so. The book that Lidorsus was supposedly reading was opened upside down. In fact, he was very aware of their presence. Dio said dejectedly that the friends he used to joke and laugh with now don't even look him in the face. Rudd agreed that this was so. He said that if it's difficult for two people to change something, then they just need to find more people to join them. A group of treasures entered the dining room. Rudd said that in any case it was too late to retreat. The treasures stopped in front of them. Their leader asked if he was Rudd Christie. Rudd looked into his eyes and answered, "Yes, so what?" One of the treasures with a bandage on his nose was indignant at how insolently he was behaving. The leader, whose name was Manon, said that he hoped Rude would come with him. He agreed, and they went out to the park. Manon told the others that they could go. His comrades left, and Manon was left alone with Rude and Dio. His face seemed familiar to Rudd. Dio whispered to him that last time this treasure was with Fidelio. Clad said that he knew why he brought him here. Rudd replied that he didn't know. It was he who brought him here. So why is he asking about it? Manon said he heard he was late. It must be true since he is so fearless. He then stated outright that Rude had better stay away from that monster bastard. Rudd was surprised. A monster. He doesn't quite understand what he means. Is there a monster in Helios? Manon stated that he does not like word games. Is it just sympathy, or does he feel satisfaction in playing along with such a bastard? He better stop doing this. There is a reason behind every result. He'd better stop getting involved in things he doesn't understand and focus on his own. If he stays close to him, he will only lose everything and gain nothing. Rudd asked if he gave him advice. Manon replied that this was not advice. He warns him. Rude and Dio were sitting in the school courtyard. Rudd said that meant it was a warning. Dio stated that since he had come to the point of telling him this, they should really just keep it simple. Rudd asked, "Just what?" Dio said forget it and asked what he was going to do next. First of all, they need more allies. Not that that would be easy. Rudd said that we could think about this later, but for now, we need to gather information and find out what really happened. Dio asked how he was going to find out. Rudd replied that the easiest thing to do would be to ask him directly. First, you need to have a normal conversation with Lidorsus, and then think about what to do next. Overthrow Cheval or turn the school upside down. Rudd looked into the warehouse where Lidorsus usually hid, but there was no one there. Where did he go? Meanwhile, Lidorsus was in the professor's office. She asked if he really had no problems with his academic life. Lidorsus replied that he had no problems. The professor said that she knew Diner and that if something was bothering him, he could speak up without hesitation. She added that if he doesn't want to help himself, then the school can't do anything either. But Lidorsus remained silent. There were many students in the school building. Rudd stopped one of them, and he politely asked if he had seen Lidorsus. But he replied that he didn't know and quickly ran away. The students looked at Rudd strangely, wondering why he was looking for the offspring and advising each other not to look him in the eye. Rudd thought that it was quite difficult to start a conversation with them. Could he really be that disgusting to them? Suddenly, a girl with silver hair told him that if he was looking for the offspring, then he seemed to have gone to the Western warehouse. She added that he had a magic box in his hand, so she was probably right. Rudd thanked the girl for this information. The friends immediately pounced on the girl, whose name was Isle. They asked why she even talked to people like him. Of course, they will protect her if anything happens. But one should be careful. Rudd turned to Isle and her friends. He said that he was not looking for the spawn, but for Lidorsus. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the girl confused. Rudd chose a spot from which he could see Lidorsus if he really went to the Western warehouse. He was gone for a long time, and Rudd thought that he had already passed by. Finally, he saw Lidorsus, who was carrying a box of stones. He wanted to shout at him, but I thought that calling him from here wasn't entirely convenient. He remembered Manhwa warning him. However, after thinking about it, he decided to ignore the threats, and he called out loudly throughout the entire yard to Lidorsis, and he waved his hand at him. He shouted for him to wait for him and that he would come soon. But Lidorsis pretended not to hear him, and he ran. Rudd thought the rascal was running away again. He remembered how he left last time. Rudd realized that he would avoid him until the very end. To the surprised looks of the other students, he jumped down, and he ran after Lidorsis. The students watched what was happening in amazement. One of the students asked the green-haired girl whose name was Rin, "Did she see that guy jump from such a height?" Rudd continued to chase Lidorsis. The students asked each other what was happening, why they were running. Rudd thought that he had unwittingly become a spectacle for them. This rascal ran pretty fast and he couldn't catch up with him. Rudd sped up and almost grabbed Lidorsis by the clothes, but he suddenly began to grab stones from the box and charge them with magic, and throw it back in his direction. Rudd was surprised that he could use magic. One of the stones hit him right in the forehead. Lidorsis turned around and apologized for that. Rudd was indignant. If he felt sorry, then he should just stop running. Why did they even arrange this senseless chase? Lidorsis replied that it happened because he was chasing him. Rudd countered that he was the one who started running away first. Lidorsis said he ran away because he called him. He looked down. There stood Chevla von Hadelio with a group of clads. Chevla raised his head and saw Lidorsis standing. Rudd said that he shouldn't run away and suggested that they just talk normally. Lidorsis suddenly shouted at him not to come near him. Rudd looked at him in surprise. Lidorsis added that he should just stay away from him. Rudd picked up the fallen stone, and he launched it at Lidorsis's head. He grabbed the bruised area in amazement. Rudd approached him and grabbed him by the collar. He asked what he would do if he came that close. Rudd added that he was not going to do anything to him, but simply wanted to talk to him. Suddenly, Chevelle appeared next to him. Balancing on the railing, he asked again, "To talk with this brat?" He put his foot on Lidorsis's back. He asked Rudd what he wanted to talk to him about. What is the guy from Eden going to talk to this creature about? Rudd made an imperceptible movement and Chevelle fell from the railing down. Lidorsis was horrified, and Rudd looked after him impassively. He said the guy had a terrible habit, but he landed pretty well. Rudd suggested that Lidorsis leave here for some quiet place. Then someone's hand fell on Rudu's head. It was an angry Hadelio. He asked Rudd ominously that he seemed tired of living. He calmly replied that he wanted to live and politely asked her to take her hands off him. Chevelle asked how he dared to speak so insolently without knowing who he was. Rudd replied that of course he knew who he was, Chevelle von. He asked Lideris what happened next. Rudd said, "Isn't he the same great and supreme Heriaz?" intercepting his hand. Chevelle grinned smugly, but suddenly gasped when Rudd squeezed his hand. He screamed, "Where did this cocky bastard come from?" Chevelle shouted to the girl who was standing among the treasures, "Anna." She threw him a magic stone. Chevelle cleverly caught him and said that he was not so magnanimous as to tolerate his insolent behavior. While putting the chain with the magic stone around his neck, he said that he should take this opportunity to find out what happens if you behave rudely towards Kariaz. Rude thought that this was a high-level magic stone. Was he really trying to use magic with it? Chevelle declared that it was too late to regret it now. He had to look with both eyes at the magic of the future great magician. Rudd asked Lidorsis what he was going to do now. He replied that he needed to call the professor. Rudd agreed and told him to go, but Lidorsis said that it was better for him to go. Chevelle was indignant. What were they whispering about? Didn't they understand what situation they were in? And began to read the spell. Rudd and Lidorsis watched him closely. Rudd thought it was a magic spell. He didn't want things to get out of control, so it was better to run away. Lidorsis said that he had told him not to come near him and ordered him to leave. He said that he would sort everything out himself. Rudd looked at him in surprise. What is this bastard trying to do on his own? Chevelle chuckled and said how touching it was. It had been a long time since he had seen him muttering like that in front of him. He only went crazy because some newbie started paying attention to him. Lidorsis replied that that was not the issue. He simply had nothing to do with it. Chevelle screamed at him to shut up and pressed his hand to his face. He said that this is the endless nightmare that he desires. He will send him to hell. He said, "Say, Lidorsis, it's beautiful." A little girl with golden hair was walking in the meadow. She was holding a flower in her hands. Blood appeared on the girl's face and clothes. She stood in front of Lidorsis. Suddenly a monster appeared behind the girl. Horror entered Lidorsis's voice and he said, "Please no." But Chevelle, with an unyielding face, continued to influence him. Rudd knocked Chevelle down with an elbow strike. He leaned over Lidorsis, who had lost consciousness. Shevla screamed, he was crazy, how dare he interfere? Rudd asked what he did with Lidorsis. Shevla said that this monster seemed to have forgotten what he was guilty of, and he simply reminded him of it. A monster like him, who doesn't know his place, must be punished. Shevla stated that he also seemed to not know his place, and therefore should also be punished. Shevla asked if he had a memory he didn't want to remember or a fear he didn't want to relive. He added that, in any case, he could show it to him clearly and distinctly. Rude thought he was using illusion magic. Then it was clear who was behind the story of how Lidorsis turned into a monster in the library. He wondered if he should deal with it himself. A menacing cry rang out. What is he allowing himself, Shevla von Hadelio? It was Professor Khan who came running. Shevla told Rudu that he could consider himself lucky. Professor Khan leaned over Rude and Lidorsis, who lay nearby without any sign of consciousness, and asked if they were in pain. She sternly asked Shevla if he understood what he had done to those students from Eden. Rude continued to pretend to be unconscious and thought that the time had not yet come. But what happened between these two? A group of curious students tried to hear what was going on in Professor Hale's office. Rudd was sitting there. Professor Hale said he heard him jump from a high balcony at school yesterday. Is that true? Rudd replied that no. The professor asked what about him running around campus with Mr. Ardian like crazy. Rudd replied that he hadn't done that either. Hale said he, too, immediately thought it wasn't true. He added that he started his studies late due to illness, so of course he couldn't have pulled off such a thing. Rudd thought with embarrassment that he had completely forgotten about the illness, and when the professor asked if he was right, Rudd immediately agreed. Hale advised him to be careful. It would be foolish for him to come to school after recovery only to get sick again. Also, if he crosses paths with Hariaz incorrectly while being Eden, it will affect his entire school life. Rudd walked down the corridor and thought that in the end, he again couldn't have a normal conversation with Lidorsis. Then Dio Varus literally crashed into him. He asked what happened, whether it was true that he had gotten into a fight with Shevla. Rudd said they actually met. Dio whispered that a strange rumor was spreading around the school, that he was beaten by Shevle while he was enthusiastically playing with Lord Artian. Dio asked if he was okay and not hurt anywhere. Rudd replied that he was fine, but Lidorsis was. Dio was horrified. He died. Rudd said that he is alive. Why is he burying a living person? He added that we could talk about this later, but now we needed to go. Dio asked where, and Rudd answered that he was going to Lidorsis. They walked around almost the entire school, but couldn't find him anywhere. Rudd decided to check the warehouse again. Duo asked if it wouldn't be better to wait for him in class. While inspecting the warehouse for the second time, they saw Lidorsis hiding behind some boxes. Dio was surprised. He was really here. They moved towards him, asking what he was doing there. Lidorsis did not react to their approach. Rudd suggested talking while there was still such an opportunity. He asked Lidorsis if he wanted some candy. Rudd sat down next to him and told him to forget about the rumors that he was turning into a monster. He also asked why Shevla von Hadelio called him a monster. Lidorsis said it was none of his business. What they call him has nothing to do with him, so let him just leave him alone. Lidorsis shouted at Rudu to stop caring about him, to stay away from him, and to stop paying attention to him. Rudd looked at him in surprise. Rude asked if he was going to let them keep calling him a monster and just live here. Lidorsis replied that yes, he's still a real monster after all. Rudd said okay and extended his clenched hand to Lidorsis. He looked at the candy in his hand in surprise. Rude said that there was nothing to be done. If he didn't want to talk about it, then he would have to ask Shevla von Hadelio, because he needs to know why he calls him a monster just out of pure curiosity, so it's none of his business. His name is Rudd Christie. He started school a month late due to illness, and it is said that he has had poor health since childhood. Shevla said that for a man in poor health, he looks quite cheerful. Anna continued to report. He lives in the same room with that monster, and the student he communicates with, Dio Varus, is from the same class. She added that he was the first person ever to receive a perfect score in the entrance exams. Shevla asked, "That's why he acts like he's the boss here? He's bragging because he passed some test." Anna asked what they would do next. Shevla said that of course it was necessary to make sure that he could not get up and threw a magic stone on the table. Thick black smoke was coming out of the stone. Soon he stopped coming out. A black cloud flew across the school grounds. Gradually, it turned into an ominous black shadow, which soon disappeared. However, the figure standing on the balcony noticed something strange flying past. It was Lady Tessiana. She was wondering what it was, but she was distracted by a child's voice calling her. Tessie, the man sitting at the table with the girl, said that the princess should not play with her food. She said that Roma asked not to call her princess. He replied that then she shouldn't call Lady Tessiana Tessie either. Rom reminded her that she wasn't Tessie here. And Professor Rowell, night fell on Helios. The master asked how Rudd was going at school and whether he had made any friends yet. Rudd sat on the roof and communicated with the master using a magic stone. He replied that it didn't matter and said that Lidorsis didn't particularly want help and asked not to pay attention to him. If Lidorsis himself doesn't want this, then he won't be able to do anything either. Maybe it would be better for him to end the mission. The master replied that he had not asked under any circumstances, but that he did not want help at all. Rudd replied that he didn't know. It seemed like he had his own reasons that they knew nothing about. But the kids here are really weird. They act as if they were hypnotized, calling him a monster, avoiding him, ignoring him. It seems that this whole situation was orchestrated by Chevla von Hadelio from the senior class. The master asked again, Hadelio, and Rude asked if he knew him. The master replied that he certainly knew about Hadelio. This is an ancient noble family that has been producing powerful magicians for a long time. The head of the family, Marquis Hadelio, is at the very center of the imperial nobility and leads an active and brilliant life. Marquis Hadelio and Duke Artian are known for their feud. Perhaps their personal feud is due to a conflict between families. Rudd said it wasn't really a feud, but rather just Lidorsis suffering unilaterally. The master suggested that perhaps Lidorsis had done something wrong. Perhaps he had taken the girl away, or Chevla had lost something valuable because of him. He said that in any case he would try to find out more about these two genera. He also stated that Rudu shouldn't take everything too seriously. The task was important, but he should enjoy his school life. For example, making friends or trying to make friends with someone. But Rudd had already broken the magical connection. He decided that he needed to observe some more first. The house stood by the sea, on the very edge of a high rocky cliff. Suddenly, a hand grabbed hold of the parapet surrounding the house from the seaside. Soon, a rather strange-looking young man appeared. He explained why Mrs. Ruby Monter chose this particular place as her home. Apparently, she not only lacks the sense of style to adapt to this place, but she also needs to change her hot temper. He put his hand on the door and suddenly found himself inside the room. He greeted Mrs. Ruby and said that Elsabel had arrived. However, there was only a huge fish in the room. Elsabel sighed with relief. It looked like she wasn't here. The huge fish reported that Mrs. Ruby Monter had stepped out for a moment. Elsabel stated that it seemed that the human world turned out to be much more interesting than he thought. The fish asked if he had swum across the sea and asked him to move away because he smelled of sea fish. Elsabel was indignant. If anyone here smelled like sea fish, it was him. He asked why he was in such a state, since Ruby had told him to get used to his human form, and he replied that he was feeling stuffy. Elsabel said it was no wonder he was feeling stuffy, since he was locked up and advised him to find something fun to do. The fish replied that, unlike him, he had not come here on vacation. Elsabel grinned wickedly, and suddenly he grabbed the fish by the tail. He stated that as a teammate he could not ignore his complaints and dragged the fish to the window. And with a cry of Flyka, he threw her off the cliff. The fish plopped far into the sea. Elsabel asked if he felt better. The fish emerged from the sea already in human form. A rather menacing-looking man stated that his vile and rude character had not changed even here. Elsabel said that he was still as boring and dull as before. He called his interlocutor Gamad and said that here people like him are called fish. A young girl with horns was watching them. Ruby Monter asked what they were doing here when she told them to sit there quietly. She looked at the letter, which stated that the infiltration of the Helios Academy of Magic was successful. And it calmed down. In any case, everything is going according to plan. Morning has arrived at the Helios School of Special Magic. Professor Khan called loudly for Professor Lowell, but she did not answer. But then she saw Professor Hale. She approached him and asked if he had seen Professor Lowell. Professor Hale replied that he had not seen her today. He continued to go about his business. Professor Khan asked if this was the same teleporter that would be used in the upcoming practice in Eden. She said it looked quite complicated and asked if it was his work. He replied that it was. Professor Kang stated that she heard that the tower would be used this time, and the practice would be held in that training room. If the teleport is like this, then it will surely be something amazing. Hale replied that this was the first practical training session of the year, and it had to be carried out properly, without incidents or accidents. Professor Khan stated that, as expected from the Master of Teleportation, Professor Hale, Dio Veras placed a blue notebook on the table. Rudd asked what it was. Dio said that this was valuable information that he had collected with all his might. He added that it was not an easy journey. All the guys avoided him, and when he tried to talk, they simply ignored him. Rudd clarified that everyone listed here has abilities that can counter Chevla. Dio replied that it was not exactly like that. He simply chose the noble ones and those who show excellent results. Rudd looked past him skeptically. Dio was indignant and said that he tried his best to find out everything. A girl with green hair, Rin, watched their conversation closely. Her friend even noticed it. Dio said the others on the list might not be very important, but these two would definitely be useful. Firstly, this is Utiarnan Maria Canciol. She is the only representative of the imperial family in Helios. At school, she's called a princess, and with the school's permission, a bodyguard from the Imperial Guard is always with her. Even the teachers are afraid to contradict her. If she becomes an ally of Prince Artian, then Chevle is nothing. Dio asked if anyone had heard him by any chance. Rudd replied that no one had, although everyone around them could hear them perfectly well. There was talk that the two were up to something, and since Rude Christie showed up, they hadn't had a quiet day. They are already in the same class as the monster, and now these two are involved. They will definitely be dragged in and will suffer for nothing. The green-haired girl's friend was indignant. If they had treated the monster normally, they would have been the first to suck up to him. She expressed her indignation to Rin, but she remained silent. Rudd asked who was second then. Dio replied that the second one is Lapis Yuen Nuadli, the only son of Duke Nuadli. He is influential even within the walls of the school. Unlike Lidorsis, he is the only heir. Duke Nuadli and Chevle entered Helios at the same time. They had a bad relationship. Now they just ignore each other. Rudd said that if he didn't like Chevle, it would be easier to get close to him. Dio agreed, but said there was one minor problem. Since joining Helios, he still hasn't been able to rank up in Eden. Dio explained that it was most likely due to a lack of ability. In theoretical disciplines, he always occupies the first positions, but in the practical application of magic, he lacks skills. Although he has no talent for magic, he is popular as the Duke's heir and hates Chevle, which may prove useful. Dio said that he wanted to find someone normal from those who study in Herias, but it was impossible to get close to them. He stated that in any case, for now, it's only these two. Suddenly, two students from the treasure entered their class. They asked for attention from those present. The students were surprised that Treasure was doing there. The students from the treasure announced that they had come to deliver a message from Professor Eubinos, who was supposed to have his next lesson. Instead of the planned lesson, there will be preparation for the upcoming practical training. Therefore, orders were given for everyone to move to the Eastern Lecture Hall. Rudd thought he wasn't quite confident about the practical training. He noticed that Lidorsis was not in his place. Where did that guy go again? Meanwhile, Lidorsis sat with his back pressed against the wall in a narrow passageway. He had just been doused with water. One of the treasures stated that the image of a wet mouse was very attractive to the monster prince. He added that they wanted to remind him that having a couple of idiots on his side doesn't change his position. Manon appeared and ordered them to stop. He said that today's goal is not to mock this monster, that's clear. Then another treasure approached him, and he whispered something in my ear. Manon smiled and thought that since the stage was already set, it was time to bring the monster there. Meanwhile, Rudd continued his search for Lidorsis. Dio told him that they had already done what they could and suggested that they stop searching. Neither in the dormitory nor in the warehouse. Prince Ardian was not in any other place. And because of this, they were already late for class. Rudd said, "Where could he be?" He was definitely in class this morning. Dio assumed that he was probably sleeping peacefully and resting somewhere. He said that he needed to go to the big auditorium. If he was penalized for being late, he was finished. Every point counted for him. Rudd agreed to stop searching and go to class, but he thought he had a bad feeling about this. The students gathered in a large auditorium, but the professor was not there. Only the Kladovtsi stood on the stage. They were whispering about what was going on. Where was the professor? Shouldn't there be a lesson now? And why are there students from Clad here? Manon stepped forward and asked if all the students from Professor Hale's group were there. Having received an affirmative answer, he said that since all the main participants had gathered, then let's begin. The classroom was empty. Professor Eubinos looked around the empty room in surprise. He wondered where everyone had gone. Dio said how important this lecture is since they closed all the doors. It's quite suspicious. Rudd thought what was even stranger was that he knew this secret entrance. Dio led them to a small door and said that it looked like they would have to crawl. Manon spoke to students from Eden. He showed them the manosphere and said that until the trainees become official mages, they won't be able to use magic without a manosphere or stone, so the first thing they are taught is to activate the mana inside the sphere. The manifestation of mana is the most basic and important, so today they will have a special lesson as part of their preparation. Manon said that the lesson was being held to see how they could activate mana. One of the students asked if the professor knew about this. Manon remained silent. Two Kladovs approached the student who asked the question, and under the frightened glances of other students, they took him out of the hall. Manon asked if anyone else wanted to say anything. The students fell silent. Manon said that then he would first explain to them something about the mana spheres they would be using. This sphere was created for testing purposes and should not be used for anything other than demonstrating magic. If you manifest mana into the sphere, it will change color depending on their skills. The better a person uses the mana in the sphere, the brighter the light and the more powerful the force contained within will be. However, they may only have minor changes in color. They will be judged by the power that lies behind the sphere, for which they will conduct a target practice. At his signal, two Clads rolled out a target to which Lidorsis was chained. This target has a special treatment. It cannot deal damage unless it is backed up by mana. Therefore, you need to do the following: manifest mana in spheres and throw them at the target. Manon said that was all they would do in this lesson. The students whispered in surprise. He wants them to throw mana spheres at him. Manon said that of course there was nothing funny about throwing spheres around for no reason. Therefore, whoever hits the head gets bonus points. The treasures poured mana spheres out of the boxes. They rolled at the students' feet. Manon asked who wanted to be first. He looked around the room and his gaze changed. Manon said indignantly that he was not here. He grabbed his assistant and asked why he was not there. Diovaris peered out from behind cover and watched what was happening. Rudd, standing behind, asked if the lesson had started yet. Dio hissed at him to come back immediately. He said that something strange was happening and that the professor needed to be called. Manon frowned in irritation. One of the treasures asked him what they should do next, since they had already gone too far. Manon replied that they needed to continue to act according to the plan. He thought gloomily that he had pulled this whole thing off without Chevel's knowledge. But things hadn't gone as planned. El looked thoughtfully at the mana sphere in her hand. Clad asked if anyone had the courage to be the first. If not, then he would have to choose himself. He pointed at the girl, who was pressing her hands to her chest. Clad told her to go first and handed her the sphere. The girl looked at him with fear and whispered that she couldn't. Then Clad asked if maybe she wanted to become a target herself. The girl turned to her friends for help, but they only silently looked away. The girl took the mana sphere in her hand and concentrated. The sphere in her hand glowed faintly. Clad said that as expected, the color did not change much. He stated that the next step is the most important. Since she's first, he'll give her extra points if she just hits the monster. The girl gathered her strength, and she threw the mana sphere. However, the sphere did not even reach the stage and fell to the floor. Clad stated that she was disqualified. He thought that everything was not going as it should and the situation needed to be corrected. He shouted to his comrade to set an example. He activated the mana sphere and threw it at the target. She hit Lidorsis right in the head. The students were horrified. Clad said, "Excellent. Everyone saw how it is done." He asked who was ready to be next. Dio, who was watching this scene from behind cover, whispered, "Damn bastards." He turned to Rudd and told him to quickly bring the teachers, but he had already disappeared somewhere. Suddenly, someone's hand rose in the crowd of students. Clad looked at the one who raised his hand in surprise. It was Rudd. He said he wanted to be next. Everyone was surprised by his sudden statement. Manon thought that Rude Christie had finally shown up. Yell also couldn't understand what this guy was trying to do. The treasure on stage said, "Excellent," and suggested he try it. Rudd took the mana sphere and prepared himself. Clad said that if he could hit the monster, then... He didn't finish and his gaze froze in surprise. The sphere launched by Rudd made a huge hole in the target. All the treasures, including Manon, were stunned. Yell was also surprised. Dio's eyes widened. He couldn't understand what Rude was doing. Lidorsis glanced at the hole in the target that had appeared next to his head. Rudd said with disappointment that he missed. Manon whispered that this couldn't be. Lidorsis felt the chains that bound him loosen after the blow. Rudd raised another mana sphere. He said he was very sorry he missed and asked if he could try again. He began to awaken the sphere and declared that this time he would definitely hit the target. The mana sphere in his hand glowed brightly and suddenly cracked. To the astonished gaze of the spectators, it shattered into tiny pieces. Rudd said it must have been defective, so he took another one. The treasure that was in charge of the activity tried to stop him, but he did not listen to him and turned to Lidorsis. Rudd told him that he was serious and if he didn't want to get hit, he'd better get lost. With these words, he threw the sphere. The students watched what was happening in amazement. Lidorsis lunged and fell off the target. The mana sphere hit Cladu squarely on the forehead. Rudd asked for forgiveness. The rest of the treasures looked silently at their fallen comrade. Rudd asked why he was even standing there, how awkward it was. Dio, watching from behind cover, thought that it was not for nothing that he immediately sensed that he was not an ordinary guy. The students froze in surprise. Isle whispered, "Rudd Christie, who is he?" Manon couldn't believe her eyes. The sphere pierced the target completely. Even he couldn't leave a scratch on it. Moreover, the color of his sphere was close to the color of a snake. How could Eden manifest such a color? Manon was confused. Maybe it was some kind of trick, although it can't be called a trick. Who is this guy? Rubbing his shoulder, Rudd said that everything was bad. The target is broken. The target is no longer in the center. How about choosing a new target? The students froze upon hearing about the new goal. Rudd explained that this could be the case, for example, the one who staged this unpleasant performance, or one of his loyal henchmen. Or how about the person who created this special class becomes the target of the training? Rudd said it would be interesting for sure, wouldn't he? Manon was indignant. This brat was talking about a new goal. He stated that he would then choose the target personally. And that target will be Rudd Christie. Manon shouted for everyone to grab that brat. Dio, who was watching from behind cover, declared that he couldn't just stand by and had to help him. He rushed forward, but someone's hand grabbed him by the collar. It was Professor Rowell. Dio was delighted to see Professor Rowell and tried to explain the situation, but she told him to be quiet. He was surprised and asked what she was going to do. She replied that she was watching. Dio was indignant and tried to say something, but she covered his mouth with her hand. Professor Rowell watched everything that was happening in the classroom closely. Meanwhile, Rudd launched a sphere at one of the treasures and hit it right in the face. He fell and didn't move anymore. The rest of the treasures rushed towards him to stop him and prevent him from raising the sphere. They even managed to capture him. But Rudd punched one of the treasures holding him, and he kicked the other one away. He looked at the third treasure holding him, and he retreated in fear. Rudd said that he was sorry, but he was in a bad mood today, so please don't grab him as you please. The Eden students were shocked by what was happening. Manon asked his assistant if he still had the sphere. He said that there were a lot of them lying on the floor. Manon stated that he did not need an experimental sphere, but a real sphere that he could use. But the student replied that they only had experimental spheres. Manon picked up the experimental sphere. He thought that Rudd Christie was definitely not an ordinary guy. Manon addressed everyone present and declared that anyone who could hit Rudd Christie would receive a reward. At the same time, he activated his sphere, and he threw it at Rudd. Rudd calmly looked at the sphere flying towards him. But then Lidorsis rushed towards him and shielded him from the blow with his body. Rudd was surprised that this indifferent guy reacted like that. He asked him why he took the blow on himself. Manon screamed angrily, calling him a monster. He asked those around him why they were standing there like idiots and ordered them to throw spheres at the two of them. Professor Rowell continued to calmly observe what was happening. Rudd asked Lidorsis how he was, if all his bones were intact. The remaining clads raised the spheres and prepared to throw them at Rudd and Lidorsis. Rudd told Lidorsis that he wanted to know just in case whether he had a strange hobby or whether he just liked being bullied. He indignantly replied that no. Rudd said it was reassuring and asked why he had covered for him then. Since he asked to stop caring about himself, he shouldn't care whether he gets hit or not. It will be fair for both of them. Lidorsis stated that it was all his fault and he could not allow anyone to suffer because of him. At this time, one of the treasures threw a sphere at them. Rudd pushed Lidorsis away, and he caught the sphere in his hand. He asked Lidorsis what he was even talking about. It wasn't his fault. Clad froze in surprise when he saw that he had caught the sphere. Rudd added that the whole point is that he simply hates such people. Some treasure screamed, "Throw spheres at it." But then the sphere launched by Rudd knocked his comrade off his feet. Rudd dodged the sphere flying at him and began counting the enemies he had eliminated. This one was the first. He knocked down Treasure, who was calling for spheres to be thrown at him. And I thought it was the second one. Another treasure shouted indignantly at what this brat was doing. Third, fourth, Rudd continued to count. He wondered how much was left, and also where Lidorsis was now. Lidorsis, meanwhile, stood in front of the crowd of Idens and took on the spheres flying at them. Rudd wondered what this idiot was doing. The other students looked at him in confusion. Suddenly, Rin shouted that he was bleeding. She ran up to him and began to untie his hands. She whispered barely audibly, "I'm sorry." Lidorsis looked at her in confusion. Meanwhile, Rudd struck another treasure. He wondered if it was the 11th or the 12th. Rudd said that it looked like these were the only guys left. He looked at the stage where Manon stood with two henchmen. They looked at him and feverishly thought about what to do now. Rudd slowly approached them. Manon was confused as to what he was. Almost all the other treasures were defeated. Manon even thought that maybe he was sleeping now. Rudd came almost right up to the stage. He smiled sweetly and asked, "Shall we continue?" Rin walked up to Lidorsis and said again, Sorry, she tried to talk to him. But someone's hand held her back. It was her friend who tried to pull her away from Lidorsis. Rin looked at her, and also on my other classmates. She asked them how much longer they were going to continue this. They really think that Lidorsis is a monster. Rin said that she herself is good, but it is so mean. Ardian didn't do anything to them. Why are they treating him like this? Because they are afraid of high school students. Rin stated that she doesn't know how good Haraeus or Clad are, but we can't let them get to all of them, so Rin couldn't finish speaking as someone's body flew past her. She looked at him with fear. The other students gasped in astonishment. Another treasure collapsed at their feet. Lidorsis looked at the stage. Only Rude and Manon remained standing on it. Manon screamed. Did he really think he could get to all of them? Chevla would definitely do something to him and to this monster. Rudd coldly stated that he was tired of all this talk about the monster. He said that there are those who are being bullied, and he has no way to respond. And there are those who gather in groups to intimidate a helpless person. Rude asked Manon which one of them he thought was the real monster, and he answered his own question. It was him. Suddenly, a loud scream from Dio was heard. He was shouting his name. Rudd turned around at the scream, and he saw a brightly glowing sphere flying towards him. Rudd dodged her with ease. The sphere hit Manon right in the forehead. The students gasped. Manon fell, leaving only Rude standing on the stage. Rudd didn't understand what happened and who threw the last sphere. In the sudden silence, someone's footsteps were heard. Rudd thought he had seen this man somewhere before. It was Professor Rowell. Rude remembered meeting her at the auction house. Then he fought with her and Shikmuon. Rudd was surprised to think that she turned out to be Helios's professor. The students were delighted. Apparently it was she who threw the sphere. They were saved. Professor Rowell turned to Rude. She asked why he dodged. Rudd stared at her, uncomprehending. While picking up a new sphere, she said that he could easily place the sphere, but he dodged. Dio couldn't believe his eyes. She was about to throw the sphere again. Professor Rowell told him not to shy away this time. She was interested. Rudd tried to stop her. Suddenly, other professors entered the hall. Professor Hale asked what was going on here. He saw Professor Rowell holding a manosphere in her hand. Professor Khan yelled at her what she was doing. She looked around and saw a target that had been pierced through and through, and the treasures lying on the floor, many of whom were unconscious. Professor Khan asked Rowell in shock if she had really done this. Doi grabbed his head. What the hell was going on? He looked at the stage, and I saw that Rudd was lying there next to the target. Professor Hale ordered the medics to be called and ordered the students to return to their classrooms. Professor Rowell looked thoughtfully towards Rude. Helios School of Magic, Eden Student Study Area. The students in Eden's class looked at the unusual guest with curiosity. Lapis irritably told his interlocutor that now everyone was staring at him and asked how long he would be here and whether it was time for him to go to his own territory. His interlocutor was a student from Carice's class. He said that most likely it was not because of him. He also asked where Lapis thought his territory was. He stated that all of Helios was their territory. Here is said that during a private training session, he saw little Whoopi. He was so cute, and it was even strange that he was growing up into a scary monster. Lapis was indignant. He was bragging about attending private training. Carrie said that now was the time for him to tell him the story of how he met the Black Mage. Lapis hissed at him to keep his voice down. He said he had already said that there was nothing significant about it. He just met him by chance, that's all. Carrie said he wanted to hear everything in great detail. Who he was, what he loved, his hobbies, his style of clothing, his favorite food. Lapis asked wearily what he was ultimately trying to achieve. He replied that the Black Magician was the object of his admiration. He had already submitted a request to Opian several times to meet with him, but each time he was refused, as if the authorities were filtering out these requests. That's why he also wants to meet him by chance. Lapis was lost in memories of the moment when they teleported from the auction. The girl accompanying the Black Mage, I think her name was Ren, indignantly said that she would definitely discuss this situation with the master. Lapis and Runa watched them. Ren asked Blow if he was injured, and he replied that he was perfectly fine. They were about to leave, but Lapis asked them to wait. Ren and the Black Mage turned around in surprise. Lapis then thought that such an opportunity only comes once in a lifetime. He told the Black Mage that this might seem strange, but he wants to learn from him. The Black Magician looked at him in surprise. Lapis confirmed that he really wants to become the Black Mage's apprentice. He may have a difficult path ahead, but his dream is to one day become as strong as the Black Mage, and he will do everything possible to not tarnish his reputation. But then Ren stopped him and said that it was impossible. Lapis looked at her questioningly. She explained that Opium members must focus solely on their missions and are forbidden from taking on disciples. Lapis had no choice but to accept the refusal. Now he recalled that story with shame. Why did he even open his mouth then? Are you completely crazy? Fidelio entered the hall with his henchmen. Lapis's interlocutor greeted him and Anna. Fidelio asked him in surprise if he was still in touch with that student from Eden who had sunk to the bottom. Lapis said that this is the voice of the one who plays games with power, who among them has sunk even lower. His interlocutor turned to Fidelio and said that Lapis called him a child. Fidelio responded by saying that he was pathetic and that he wasn't going to waste his time on him. He called Anna and the others and left. Lapis said gloomily, "Who else is pathetic here? How long will this continue?" His interlocutor asked him what he was talking about. It was bothering him so much. In one of the schoolrooms, Professor Khan and Professor Rowell were asking Lidorsis and Rude about what had happened. Professor Khan said they may not believe her, but if you listen to what the students say, the damage to the target and what happened to the high school students was the work of one person. She approached Rudd Christie and asked if it was true. He replied that he didn't understand what she meant. Professor Rowell looked at him carefully, and suddenly she asked, "He is a magician, isn't he?" Lidorsis looked at Professor Rowell in surprise. Rudd dropped his head into his hands and frantically thought about what to do. Professor Khan asked what nonsense she was talking about. If Christie really was a magician, then why was he acting like this? Rudd wondered if he had really been acting too carelessly. It seemed like she sensed something, but he didn't even use mana. Professor Rowell watched him closely. Rudd said he had a terrible headache. Professor Khan became concerned and said he needed to visit the infirmary, but Rowell said he was fine. Khan asked how Professor Rowell knew this. She brought it herself when he fell. Rudd said in a weak voice that he didn't understand what they wanted from him. He was so surprised to see the sphere flying towards him that he doesn't remember anything else. Professor Rowell sharply told him to stop lying. Lidorsis's eyes widened at her. Professor Khan announced that at this point, Professor Hale said he would punish the students involved in this incident. But until this issue is resolved, they can return to class. Rudd decided that this time he seemed to have managed to jump off. Professor Roll continued to stare at him. Rudd also looked at her and thought that soon there would be fun. A group of clads with crumpled faces stood in front of Shevla. He asked why they looked like that. They tried to answer something, but suddenly they saw something and froze. Shevla was indignant at why everyone was behaving so strangely. He followed their gaze and saw Rude and Lidorsis walking. Lidorsis saw him too. Shevla called them rudely. Rudd Christie looked at him indifferently. And then he smiled at him. Shevla was surprised. He smiled. What the hell is going on? Lidorsis asked Rudd what he was doing, but he pulled him by the shoulder, and they passed by Shevla with his retinue. Shevla and Fidelio watched them go. Rudd and Lidorsis walked down the corridor. Suddenly, Lidorsis stopped. Rudd turned and asked him what happened. Lidorsis said that much more could happen from now on. Because of him, a figure appeared in his mind, telling him that he himself must understand that he only brings misfortune. Lidorsis told Rudd that he would only bring him suffering. Rudd said that it was he who cursed him or something. He asked if he saw what happened before. It was not for him to say. But even if there are 100 of them, it will mean absolutely nothing. And if something happens, it is not his fault and he will not have any problems. Therefore, he needs to stop worrying about others and finally think about himself, how he will live on with such a gentle character. Lidorsis replied that he did not know everything. Rudd agreed that he didn't know what he was thinking or what was going on, and it doesn't seem like he's willing to tell it on the first request. However, he can ask him for help, and he doesn't dare to speak anymore, so that Rudd doesn't pay attention to him. No matter what it is, he will help him. Lidorsis couldn't understand why he was doing this. He told Rudd that he didn't need his help, and he turned to leave. Rudd chuckled and said he noticed it, but Lidorsis had already run away from him again. Eden's class at Helios School of Magic. Most of the students were confused. One of the girls expressed the general opinion by asking what would happen to them now. The student next to her said that because of this incident, not only Claude, but also Caresse began to ignore them. Dio watched the students' reactions with dejection. Why did they even get dragged into this? It's all because of this monster. Why should everyone suffer because of one? Now all the other students avoid them like insects. The girl said that she could ask the professor to transfer them to another class, but she was told that it would be better to make him stop going to theirs. Dio couldn't resist and indignantly asked what they were even talking about. Suddenly, Rin stepped forward and loudly told everyone to shut up. The students looked at her in amazement. Rin asked why they were all so selfish and only thought about themselves, because they feel bad when they are avoided, when they are treated the same way as they are treated with Ardian. how they think and what he feels. They actually think it's all his fault. They called him a monster and avoided him, but everyone knows the truth. They are the same as those people. Rin stated that he is also human and he also has feelings. The student objected that she had seen it too, that day in the library when the monster appeared. How can they pretend nothing happened? Rin hesitated to answer, but then another girl entered the conversation and said that it was illusion magic. El said that she heard that Chevely specializes in illusion magic and has enough mana spheres. Since he was quite skilled, it was not difficult for him to show them this illusion. If there was something wrong with Ardian, he wouldn't be in Helios. If they had used their brains even a little, they would have realized it long ago. The students were stunned by her speech. El added that they use the excuse that he is a monster and all that. But in reality, they are just afraid of Chevla and Harry's. The student was indignant and said that she thought too much of herself and that they were no better than them. El agreed that she was the same as them. But now the situation has changed. They were probably shocked, and that's why they forgot. Rudd Christie, with him they can change things. The students listened to her in surprise. Suddenly they discovered that Lidorsis was among them. His sudden appearance frightened many. Rudd Christie followed him into the room, asking why he was still behaving like this. Dio rushed to him, asking if everything was okay. Rudd froze, not understanding what he had done to attract everyone's attention. But Dio interrupted him and said that he was not asking about him, but about the treasures and what the professors had said. He replied that they had talked too much and he had not really understood them. Rudd said he felt a little dizzy, but Dio interrupted him and said that he was not asking about him, but about the treasures and what the professors had said. He replied that they had talked too much and he had not really understood them. Lidorsis tried to take the opportunity to escape, but Rude held him back. El turned to them and said, "Monster." She immediately corrected herself. That's his name, Lidorsis, and Rudd Christie. She extended her hand to them, and she said that her name was Isle Florin Chrome. Another student intervened in the conversation. Lidorsis remained motionless, but Rude shook the outstretched hand. Another student intervened in the conversation. He said his name was Noiden, and if it's not too late, he also hopes that they will get along. And they asked how he managed to break through the magic target, and also if they trained hard, they could become like him. Rudu was told that he used to be so unapproachable, and they asked how he managed to break through the magic target, and also if they trained hard, they could become like him. The couple of students who started this unpleasant conversation were perplexed as to what they were even thinking and what the point of communicating with him was. Some students approached Ardian. They reminded him of how he stopped the magic sphere in the lecture hall, and they thanked him for it. Rudd watched what was happening with satisfaction. He thought it was much better than he had expected. Manon was in the medical room. Chevle and Anna were sitting by his bed. Chevle asked why he did this at all. He didn't ask him about it. Manon apologized and said that he would take responsibility for everyone. Chevle interrupted him and said, "Great, since everything had already happened, nothing could be done, so he should remember." Chevle recalled telling Professor Hale that he had nothing to do with the incident. Professor Hale said he believed him, but he had to understand. That being the case, there is nothing wrong with extending the sentence for Manon and the rest of the hordes in accordance with the rules and regulations. Chevle asked him directly what he wanted. Professor Hale noted with satisfaction that he understood him very well. He doesn't know what Professor Hale is up to, but this is the perfect opportunity to show what he's capable of to anyone who challenges him. Chevle said he heard that Eden was planning to hold an away training session and would take some students along with him. He doesn't know what Professor Hale is up to, but this is the perfect opportunity to show what he's capable of to anyone who challenges him. Manon turned to Chevle again. He said it was that damn Rudd Christie. No matter how much he thinks about it, he is definitely not an ordinary student. So he decided that Chevle should know about it. Hadelio asked if he hit his head too hard. He tells him to be careful with some kid from Eden. Anna tried to defuse the situation and told him not to worry about trifles and to stop thinking about it. Chevle said that he would soon tell them some interesting news. Rudd and Lidorsis were sleeping in their room. Rudd wondered if he was doing everything right. Rudd looked at the sleeping Lidorsis. Lidorsis also began to communicate with them. Rudd looked at the sleeping Lidorsis. He thought he still didn't know what was going on in this guy's head, and began to accumulate near Lidorsis's bed. Suddenly, black smoke seeped into their room through a crack in the window, and began to accumulate near Lidorsis's bed. The smoke formed into a strange black figure that said, "This will happen soon." Rudd jumped up and tried to grab the black figure. He asked who he was. This face seemed familiar to him, but the figure quickly dissipated and the black smoke disappeared. Rudd wondered what it was and what it was doing to Lidorsis. However, it is unlikely that this is the same problem as Chevle. What happened to this guy? They were excited because they were about to face monsters. The students discussed the upcoming field training exercises. They were excited because they were about to face monsters. Rude and Lidorsis also came out of their room. Rudd hadn't slept well because of the story with the black shadow and was yawning slightly. Two students saw them and said hello. Lidorsis looked at them, and he passed by silently, and he greeted me with a sweet smile. Then Rudd approached them, and he greeted me with a sweet smile. Rudd tried to talk to him about what happened last night, and he told him that when someone greets him, he should greet him back. Rudd tried to talk to him about what happened last night, but he looked at him with incomprehension. Rudd said that everything was fine and it didn't matter, but he continued to think about what happened yesterday. He was sure it was magic. It disappeared without a trace, but it was unlikely that Lidorsis knew anything about it. Rudd remembered that it said that something was about to happen. He felt danger and wondered if he should inform the school, but he had no evidence. Rudd decided that he should first talk about this with the master. He woke up from his thoughts and suddenly saw that Lidorsis was standing. Rudd asked if he had been waiting for him since he had stopped, but yesterday he had been avoiding him. It seemed his opinion had changed. Rudd heard someone calling him and saw Dio running towards them. Lidorsis said to Dio, "Hello." Rudd told Lidorsis to greet him. Lidorsis said to Dio, "Hello." Dio thought it looked pretty funny from the outside. More classmates approached them and told Rudd that Professor Rowell was looking for him and that she would probably return again soon. Dio agreed. He and Lidorsis walked on, and Rudd asked Dio if he was coming with them. Dio agreed. And then the three of them walked on, arguing about which of them would be the first to enter the classroom. Professor Hale informed the class that the hordes involved in the recent incident would be dealt with accordingly. He expressed hope that this would not happen again in the future, and that this incident would remain only a bad memory. Helios will also take additional measures to enhance training, allowing students to focus on preparing for on-site training. Professor Hale added that they don't know what might happen there. After the lesson, the three of them sat in the cafeteria, and Dio said dejectedly that it was even possible to prepare oneself for a meeting with a monster. Rude suggested that they would probably have to defeat specially trained monsters, but Dio said that it wouldn't be that difficult. Rudd wondered what it could be. He was sure that the difficulty would be adjusted to the level of the students. In the end, he decided not to dwell on it. The Lidorsis case was much more important. Suddenly, Professor Rowell appeared behind Rudd and loudly called out his name. Dio and Lidorsis looked at her with alarm. Professor Rowell told Rude to follow her. He looked at her in surprise. At this time, Princess Utiarnan was talking with Rom. She told him that Tessie had found something interesting, and so she goes on field training. And she goes with her. Rom screamed in surprise and alarm at what she was doing. Meanwhile, Professor Rowell was dragging Rudd along with her. Helios School of Magic Training Arena. Lapis asked why everyone was gathered there and was told that Professor Rowell was going to fight a student from Eden. Lapis was terribly surprised and asked with whom exactly. With the guy everyone's talking about right now, I think his name is Rude Christie. Rudd Christie stood and silently looked at the wooden training sword in his hands. He did not understand how it had come to this. Dio stepped forward and stated that he couldn't believe that Professor Rowell was going to fight someone who had done nothing wrong to her, but she advised him to disappear. Dio replied, "Okay," and hid behind Lidorsis. He asked him that nothing would happen to Rude. Rudd thought he had guessed that something like this could happen. Who would have thought that she would be so stubborn? The students gathered there watched with bewilderment what was happening. Rude decided that either way, it was great. It was a great chance to show everyone how ordinary he was and make them lose interest in him. Professor Rowell said, "Let's begin," and got into a fighting stance. Rudd indignantly asked why he had a wooden sword and she had a real one, but she advised him to use magic and then there would be no problems. He tried to say that it was unfair, but Professor Rowell had already lunged at him. He decided that he had to let her hurt him in order to lose. But her attack was too fierce and he reflexively dodged. Rudd thought that if she hit him, he wouldn't get off with just a normal injury. So he continued to avoid her and tried not to talk to her. A student standing next to Lapis noted that this student from Eden was dodging all of the professor's attacks. Professor Rowell screamed at him to fight. She wasn't going to give him any slack, and she attacked him again. Dio, who was watching the fight with Lidorsis, shouted at him to be careful. Rude blocked Rowell's strike with his wooden sword. He thought that his reflexes were kicking in again and there was no getting away from it. His wooden sword did not withstand the blow and cracked. Comrade Liapis exclaimed that it was amazing. Lidorsis stepped forward and used his hand to push Professor Rowell's sword aside. She told him not to interrupt them. It was dangerous. Dio shouted that it was dangerous anyway. His sword broke in half. Raoul replied that it wouldn't break if you used magic. Rude said he wouldn't compete with her, and Raoul asked why. He replied that firstly, he didn't want to, and secondly, he didn't have enough skills for that. Lapis's friend said that it was really amazing. He had never seen the professor so excited. Professor Raoul said she did not accept his refusal. Lapis's interlocutor said that he saw Rude block the professor's sword. Even without magic, he managed to withstand such brutal attacks. Professor Raoul told Rude that he could take her sword, but he refused. You can have a fight with someone who would like to be honored to attend her magnificent private classes. With him, he loudly addressed Professor Raoul and stated that instead of forcing sparring on someone who was not interested in it, you can have a fight with someone who would like to be honored to attend her magnificent private classes. With him, Lapis said that he wanted to study with her, but she briefly answered, no. Lapis was in despair. He was refused again, and in such a rude manner. Rudd thought he had seen him somewhere before. Professor Raoul turned to Rudd Christie and said that they had been distracted too much, so they would continue next time. As she left, she added that they would still have plenty of time. All four watched Raoul as she walked away. Then Dio suddenly thought, why are there four of them, and looked at Rin standing next to him. She explained that because of the noise she thought something had happened and asked Rudd if he was okay. Dio replied that Professor Raoul had just tried to kill Rudy, but otherwise everything was fine. Lapis, surrounded by friends, was still smarting from yet another rejection. She didn't hesitate for a second. She asked if he was sure he was okay. Dio showed Rin the remains of Rude's sword and said that it had broken in half. Rudd asked her if she had received letters from Ben. She explained that she was there because she was worried about Rude and introduced herself. Her name is Rin Noah. Rudd asked her if she had received letters from Ben. Rin stated that she knew it was him. Ben mentioned him in his letters. Rin thanked Rudd warmly for delivering the letters. Then everyone heard someone calling Rin loudly. It was her friend who ran up and asked what was going on and why everyone was crowded here. They explained to her that unforeseen circumstances had arisen. Professor Raoul called Rude and offered him a sword fight. Rudd looked at Lidorsus, and he said that he was alive only thanks to him, and thanked him for closing it. Dio said that Rudd was right. If it weren't for Ardian, everything could have ended badly. Rudd asked Lidorsus how this happened. Wasn't he standing behind him? He replied that even if he had been standing a step away from him, he would have blocked her anyway, and smiled. Everyone was amazed. They saw Lidorsus smiling for the first time. At the School of Magic, Helios discussed the upcoming field training. The director asked if everything had been agreed with the tower. They answered in the affirmative and added that nothing significant had changed. The principal looked over the list of Charises who would be accompanying the younger students. It included Chevla von Hadelio and Anna Burb, also Linus Grimm and Cyndia Mass. The director asked, there are only 4 of them, and she looked thoughtfully at the name Chevla von Hadelio. She was told that there were no classes at the moment, so finding someone at school would be quite problematic. The director asked why Chevla von Hadelio was included. Professor Hale replied that the Eden's training would take a different format this time. This is the first time that so many people are teleported and the activities are coordinated with the tower. He anticipated that unexpected situations might arise, and therefore selected the most suitable people from among the Charises. He added that he had not made this decision lightly, and hoped that Hadelio would learn a lot from these field exercises. The director expressed hope that he had made the right decision and asked what had happened to the teleporter. He replied that everything was fine. The director said that was great. Let's hope that these field exercises would strengthen the relationship between the tower and Helios. She added that she expects the accompanying professors to do everything in their power. Night fell on Helios, and Rudd sat on the roof of the building. He tried to contact the master using the magic stone. Rudd wondered why the master wasn't answering, because he always answered when he needed him. But now he had so much to tell. He decided to quickly return to the room in case this black entity appeared again. After she appeared, everything became much more complicated for him. He also thought about Lidorsus. Things are going pretty well for him. He gradually began to open up. Rudd was wondering what to do next, since he couldn't contact the master. And suddenly I saw Lidorsus sitting in a chair. He asked why he wasn't sleeping and began to talk about how he had gone out for a little walk. The breeze outside was pleasantly refreshing. He asked if maybe he wanted to go with him next time. Lidorsus said he thought he was gone. Rudd replied that he was in their room now, so where could he have gone? But Lidorsus silently approached his bed and went to bed. Rudd thought that Lidorsus's behavior frightened him. When they both lay down, Rudd decided to talk about the field training. Typically, teams of 4 are formed, and if nothing changes this time, they may be on the same team. But Lidorsus did not answer. Rude asked what about Dio. Lidorsis said that if he joins them, there will be 3 of them, and 1 more participant will be needed. Rudd asked him if he didn't care about his grades. Before he fell asleep, he said that they really needed 1 more member. It was raining in Ardian Castle. Lady Daner was standing at the window when Lisbon approached her. She told him that for some reason she had a bad feeling. A homing pigeon flew up to the house on the cliff. He dropped the letter. He was caught by a girl with horns, Ruby Monter. She decided that they had found something and began to read the letter. But in it, the recipient reported that the food was excellent. He had played with people today. The activities were not enjoyable. The room was stuffy, and he wanted to go home. Ruby Monter was furious. What kind of report was this? Helios students gathered to participate in field training. Rudd reflected that several days had passed, but he still had not been able to contact the master. Maybe something really did happen. Dio ran up to them, shouting that Professor Hale's class would go first. Rudd noted that he looked nervous. Dio asked if they hadn't heard that the training venue would be in the tower. He thought he would never get into the magic tower. Rudd was surprised. The magic tower is connected to the school and provides elementary-level training. It's impossible. They're not the type to do that. Meanwhile, Lidorsis told Dio that he had already been to the tower as a child. Rudd remembered the black entity. Since that day, it has not appeared again. What relation Lidorsis has to it? Rudd thought that it would be necessary to find out after the exercises. Dio expressed regret that they were not on teams for training. They could have been a better team. Isle approached them and said that speaking of teams, she had also put in some effort to prepare. Dio stared at her in surprise. Isle stated that, based on the documents, she thought they would be divided into teams. But the fact that the rules had changed only confirmed the rumor about the tower. She was going to create the perfect team of talented people. It's a shame, but Rude Christie is #1 on her list of people she'd like to see on her team. Rudd said, so that's what it was, and thanked him. But you're not on my team. Rudd followed their gaze and saw a group of Karai students. This also attracted the attention of other students. Rudd followed their gaze and saw a group of Carrie's students. One of them, Linus Grimm, said that these joint walks remind him of the past, by the way. I wonder where Lapis is. Professor Khan led a group of students from Carres, among whom was Chevla von Hadelio. Isle said that it looked like the rumor that Carres would be with them was true. Rudd thought that meant they would go too. But why, of all people, Chevla? Is it a coincidence, or is he up to something again? Rudd looked at Lidorsis, and he said that regardless of this, he had nothing to worry about. The professors are here too, so nothing should happen. Rude thought to himself that he should take advantage of this opportunity and deal with Chevla von Hadelio. Professor Khan, meanwhile, told the seniors that even though they were Herai, they had no right to act independently. They must act according to the instructions of the professors. This is especially true for Chevla von Hadelio. Chevla replied that he understood her. There was some laughter from the group of seniors that Chevla was in trouble. Professor Khan wondered why Professor Hale had chosen Chevla for the field training. Professor Raoul was talking to the princess at the time. She asked her where Ram was. The princess replied that she had tied him up. Raoul said, "Excellent," and praised her. Raoul finally saw him. Rudd and his comrades passed by. Raoul finally saw him. Dio also saw her looking at them and shouted to warn Rude. But Rudd had already run away. Lidorsis said, "Hey, don't leave me." Rin touched Lidorsis, and she asked what happened. Why did he run away? Here, everyone saw that Professor Raoul, holding the princess in his arms, was pursuing Rude. Rin said it looked very funny. She took Lidorsis by the hand, and she suggested going after them. Professor Hale watched the students gather at the teleporter. The assistant reported that the students from his class had arrived, and the rest of the Idens were already on their way with their professors. Professor Hale said, "So the preparation is complete. Now you can begin." Black smoke thickened behind the assistant. The assistant asked the professor what he meant, but Hale replied that he no longer needed it. The students crowded in front of the teleporter. Professor Hale watched this with a smile. The students crowded in front of the teleporter. Dio stated that he had never seen such a large magical stone. It finally felt real. It seemed like they were actually going to the tower. Dio wondered where Rude had disappeared to. Here you can see individual formulas, and from the combinations that are created, it is noticeable that they are at a higher level than the usual mobile group. Looking at the connecting dots, one might assume that at least 3 formulas are used here. But what is this? Here you can see individual formulas, and from the combinations that are created, it is noticeable that they are at a higher level than the usual mobile group. Looking at the connecting dots, one might assume that at least 3 formulas are used here. But what is this? Rudd replied that the principle of connection and simultaneous activation of magic circles is usually based on the law of aspect. He looked closely at the system of magic circles surrounding the central magic stone. Rudd replied that the principle of connection and simultaneous activation of magic circles is usually based on the law of aspect. He looked closely at the system of magic circles surrounding the central magic stone. He thought he felt something strange here. Lapis said the topic of linked activation of magic circles came up at a recent symposium on Nebel research. Then Rudd felt someone grab him by the clothes. Professor Rowell was approaching them. The girl shouted loudly to Tessie that she had caught it. Dio and the others also saw him and waved their hands. Rudd wondered what to do next. Dio and the others also saw him and waved their hands. Suddenly they noticed something strange. A black haze formed above the magical teleport stone. Lapis said in surprise what it was. It began to take shape. Lapis said in surprise what it was. It began to take shape. Rudd thought it was definitely the same thing, which he saw in their room that night. A black entity hovered in the center of the teleportation hall. The students asked each other if the professors had arrived yet. A black entity hovered in the center of the teleportation hall. She waved something that resembled a hand. Streams of black smoke swirled throughout the hall. Standing under the plumes of black smoke, the students couldn't understand what was happening. Dio asked if this was the beginning of practical training. Rudd wondered why, of all the possible places it had appeared here, who had decided to put on such a show in front of everyone in Helios. He ordered Lidorsis and the others not to leave him. Professor Hale watched from above what was happening. In the hall, streams of black smoke formed into small tornadoes. Hale said that when they unite, the gate will open. Professor Khan shouted for everyone to leave immediately. Cheval asked if this was not what the professors had prepared. Professor Khan replied that something had gone wrong and that they should all leave immediately. Khan and Keresi looked at the entrance to the hall, and they saw that the door was locked. There was no way out. The students shouted what they should do now. Professor Khan activated the seal. He said his name was Demian and activated Awakening. Damian said that he didn't know who he was, but he was clearly crazy if he decided to do something like that in Helios. He must be very desperate. Rudd thought the ring's formula had changed. It didn't just appear and transform, it was planned from the very beginning. Rudd told his comrades that someone from Helios, or perhaps Helios himself, was connected to this dark figure. Demian ran and called loudly for Professor Rowell. He asked her to help, since he himself was not an expert in fighting. The black entity rushed at the students. Lidorsis and the others watched in fear as she approached. Professor Rowell said her name was Tessiana and activated the Awakening. She blocked the path of the black entity. The students watched their fight. Tessiana repelled the black figure's attack and stood in front of the students. Dio asked if Professor Rowell had sorted things out with him. Rudd replied that no. Black smoke billowed out, and again it formed into a black figure. Demian told Professor Rowell that physical attacks have no effect on this monster. Tessiana replied that it was constantly changing shape and they couldn't even hit it. I wonder where it came from anyway. Linus Griam shouted to the younger students to all come here immediately. He demanded that they hurry. Linus replied that there was no need to be so serious. After all, they were inside Helios. He was sure the professors could handle it. Shevla was indignant. How could anyone be so reckless as to simply watch in such a situation? Linus replied that there was no need to be so serious. After all, they were inside Helios. He was sure the professors could handle it. In any case, they can't get out of here in this black pillar yet. It looks like he won't harm them if they just stay put. Linus added, or not, seeing that Shevla had fallen. Students were attacked by a strange black substance. Some lay unconscious, covered in some kind of black liquid. Linus wondered if it was just water. He said Belita and activated the magic ring. He managed to create a magical shield that protected him and other students from the strange black substance. Linus said it looked like it was trying to shoot water or something at them. Shevla realized and declared that it was all quite disgusting. He looked down and saw that water had begun to accumulate there. Rudd looked at his dirty hand and said that it was black water. It was flowing out of the teleportation circle. Dio yelled at him not to touch it. Rudd thought that there was only one place where such black water existed. Could that place be connected to this circle? Professor Khan shouted at Rowell that they had to unlock that door first. They couldn't just wait idly by. Professor Rowell told Yudi not to go far. Rudd said that even if they opened the door, not all the students would be able to escape. Since they had already teleported, the circle needed to be stopped first. Tessiana stated that by destroying the magic stone, she would be able to stop the circle. Professor Khan shouted that if she destroyed the magic stone, it would explode. But Tessiana had already struck. Princess Utiarnan screamed in fear. Tessie. Rudd said in surprise that she destroyed him the first time. Princess Utiarnan screamed in fear. Tessie. But the black substance was already hanging over them, and in a moment she swallowed them up. Rudd couldn't understand why this was happening. Even though the magic stone was destroyed, why doesn't it stop? Chevla was already standing ankle-deep in water. He said he had no idea what was going on, but shouldn't they be doing something? Linus replied that he was right and that at this rate they would all soon be flooded. Chevla shouted at Linus, who was sitting on the magic seal, that he was only talking and doing nothing. He tried to climb onto the seal, despite Anna's cries that he might lose his balance. They continued to fall somewhere. There was no floor. Chevla felt a splash. They continued to fall somewhere. There was no floor. Anna screamed loudly. Chevla, but all three had already disappeared. Rudd said that this stream is definitely a teleportation circle. If someone is swallowed by the black water, they will be forcibly moved into the circle. Rudd shouted to his comrades to hold on tightly to each other and not let go no matter what. He said that much of the area is already within the circle's coverage area, and if it disrupts the flow or destroys the circle, people who are already caught in it may be in danger, so in this case, the best solution is to stick together. Rudd extended his hand to Lidorsis and told him to grab it quickly. But then a black stream rushed at him and pulled him back. Then the stream came again and carried Rin and her friend away with it. Dio and Lidorsis were left alone. Dio asked what they should do now. But the next gust of black rain carried him away too, and Lidorsis was left alone. A black shadow appeared in Lidorsis' thoughts again, telling him that he was the only one to blame for everything, wasn't he? He warned him that this is how it would be, that everyone would suffer because of him, that people like him should not be born. Isn't that so? Meanwhile, Rudy said, "My name is Blow." He finally activated Awakening. The black shadow in Lidorsis' head kept saying that this was all happening because of him. He was a monster, and a monster like him had to die. The black entity was left alone in the hall. It said that all the people were teleported, but suddenly it felt some kind of danger. Suddenly, a spear pierced her chest. Rudd thought he had made the wrong decision. It was just necessary to end it all at once. The black entity asked Blow who he was. Rudd replied that this was exactly what he wanted to ask. Under Blow's blows, the black essence began to dissipate and turn into black smoke. Blow said that he thought so. This clot of energy cannot be the main body. He asked him who he was subordinate to, why and for what purpose he moved everyone, why he was hunting for Lidorsis, who was behind him. After several clashes, the black clot replied that he didn't know and shouldn't answer him. He himself was strange. Was he really a person? Blow wondered what nonsense he was talking about. The door to the hall finally collapsed under a hail of blows. A group of professors burst into the hall asking what had happened. They suddenly froze in amazement. The hall was empty. Everyone had disappeared somewhere. Rob made his way through the crowd, and seeing that there was no one in the hall, screamed wildly, "Where is the princess?" When Lapis woke up, he had a terrible headache. He was lying in a clearing in the forest. He finally came to his senses and wondered what the hell had happened to him. Lapis looked around, but couldn't determine where he had ended up. He jumped up and started calling for the princess and Professor Rowell. Lapis tried to figure out what had happened. He only remembered that the black water suddenly poured out and Professor Rowell and the princess disappeared. Suddenly he heard some sound and, turning in its direction, saw a gaze looking at him from behind the foliage. Blow was transported to a rather strange location. He thought that he hadn't managed to find out anything before he was transported here. He looked around and said, "Is this really what he thinks it is?" Cursed lands through which black waters flow. Blow thought there was only one place that fit that description, Ishuela. Suddenly he saw monsters approaching. Blow thought he hadn't expected this from this place. He was surrounded by monsters on all sides. Lapis ran away from the ferocious monster with all his might. He wondered what kind of devilry was going on here. He must have ended up here due to teleportation and is now stuck in some hole infested with monsters. Lapis thought about what he could do in such a situation and came to the conclusion that there was nothing he could do. All he had left to do was simply run away from the monster. He thought that he was finished. Where was Runa when he needed her so much? As for Runa, he remembered telling his father about the incident at the auction and his father asking about the black mage from Opian. Lapis replied that he had met him and spoken to him, and he lost consciousness from excitement, which confused my father. When he woke up, Runa was sitting next to his bed. She then said that she had realized at the auction that the young gentleman was completely helpless without her. She then said that in case he ever found himself in trouble, she and Ran had joined forces and engraved a special spell. They placed the spell on the left side of his chest, and if he was in danger, this spell would be able to save his life 3 times. He then asked if they had really engraved a spell on his body, and upon seeing it, declared that it was a complete nightmare. Now Lapis thought that he could do something with this thing. He decided to trust Rune completely, and standing in front of the monster, shouted at him, "Attack!" Linus praised Cyndia when she defeated another monster. This was already the 3rd. He said that they had been wandering here for quite a long time, but had not met anyone yet, and besides, he did not have much strength left. Cyndia suddenly froze, and Linus asked her what was wrong. It turned out that Lapis was lying next to the monster's carcass. Linus looked at him with regret and said that Lapis was the best of the Idans. May he rest in peace. But then an indignant voice came from below, saying that he was still alive. Lapis sat up and asked what was wrong with them and where everyone else was. Linus replied that when he woke up, there was no one left except him and Cindy. Apparently, they were separated by a teleportation circle, so they began to move forward together with Cyndia. But monsters stood in their way. Lapis asked Linus if he had any idea where they were. He replied that he had no idea, but it was definitely not the magic tower. Linus added that judging by the landscape, it could only be one place. He asked if he understood what he was talking about. Lapis replied that if this was the place, then there shouldn't be any monsters here. Linus suddenly saw Cindy looking at something intently and asked what she was doing. They came closer and together stared at the unusual sight. Before them lay many bodies of defeated monsters. Lapis whispered, "Where did so many of these creatures come from?" Linus declared that the only one who could kill so many monsters was the professor, and he called on everyone to find him quickly. At this time, Blow was sitting on a rock not far from them. He tried unsuccessfully to contact the master using the magic stone. Blow thought that something was definitely wrong here and asked the master again for an answer. Suddenly, the magic stone in Blow's hands began to glow brightly. The master's voice asked why he suddenly woke up and if he had been accidentally hunted down there. Blow said he had been trying to contact him for several days. The master wanted to tell him something, but he was suddenly interrupted by Ren, who was struggling with the disorder in the office. She quietly told him not to say anything, otherwise Rudd would worry. The master told Blow that they had, frankly speaking, a small problem. There was a huge hole in the building just below the master's office, and cracks appeared all over the facade. Blow said that he was in really big trouble and asked the master if he knew of such a place. Ishuela. The master asked why he was talking about the cursed lands, and Blow replied that he seemed to be there now. The master said that it couldn't be that such a model student like him ended up there. What happened? Blow began to explain that this was part of a practical lesson. They had to get to the tower using a teleportation circle. But suddenly a strange thing appeared, black as pitch, and against this background 2 shimmering blue eyes. The master asked if she looked like him, but Blow continued to say that it was some kind of puppet charged with energy. He didn't understand what this thing did to the teleportation circle, but black waters poured out of nowhere and washed everyone away. The master was indignant, and so he ended up in Ishuel. Where would his professor look if such things were happening to his students? He entrusted it to them, thinking that such a prestigious school should take care of its charges, but he found himself in even greater danger. Here, Ren took the magic stone from the master and asked Blow what the situation was like there now. Blow replied that the students who were caught in the teleport were scattered all over the area, and that he was alone now. The problem isn't even that there are monsters here, and the fact is that whoever sent them here, apparently, is hunting Lidorsus and is plotting something. The master was alarmed. They were hunting the second young master, and also a monster. Ren intervened again and asked what they were talking about. There were no monsters in Ishuel. Cursed lands where black treetops bloom under a red sky, oozing black blood. They are said to be so, but in reality they are abandoned lands that the tower has isolated for unknown reasons. The master explained that the sky was red because of a barrier erected by the tower, which could only be passed through with high-level magic. This place is isolated from the rest of the world and monsters simply cannot live there. But he says that they are there. Blow said that so far he had only seen low-ranking monsters, but he didn't know what other species were found here. Therefore, the students who ended up here are in danger. Meanwhile, most of the students gathered in one place. Everyone was confused. No one could understand what had happened. The connection didn't work. The professors had disappeared somewhere. They were scared. Yell sat alone. 2 students approached her, asked if she was okay, and offered to stick together, promising to protect her. Eel thought that these proud suckers couldn't even defend themselves, but replied that she was fine. She looked at the lonely figure of Lidorsus sitting in the distance. Yell thought that the man sitting there seemed to be completely out of order. Where are they? It looks like a forest, but it's strange. Everyone who was there teleported, but if someone isn't here, it means they're in another place. The students argued about what to do. They couldn't just sit still. But most decided that it was better to wait until the professors came back for them, rather than wander aimlessly through unfamiliar places. Eel thought that the school wouldn't let this go, so if they waited, someone would surely come if they survived that long. Until they know who sent them here or what their goals are, they can't let their guard down. They don't know what else might happen. The Black Entity and Professor Hale watched the students' camp from a cliff. Professor Hale reminded them that 2 professors had come with them, including Rowell, who could cause problems. The Black Entity stated that there was another one, but he would take care of them. Professor Hale said that if that was the case, then they too must begin to act. Blow fought low-ranking monsters. At the same time, he said that an internal investigation of Helios would have to be conducted. Such a large-scale teleportation needs to be prepared in advance, and such a mass of vital energy needs to be present in the Academy in principle. It is impossible to carry out such a thing without our own person at the Academy. Therefore, the Master will also have to take part in this, and also notify their client, the Duchess. Due to the poor connection, Master and Ren had difficulty understanding what he was saying. Blow said that now he needed to find and protect Lidorsis and the rest of the students. The Master replied that he would do his best and advised him not to overdo it there. Blow turned towards the movement, thinking more monsters had arrived, and saw 3 students. They were Lapis, Linus, and Cyndia. Blow and the students froze in surprise and looked at each other. Blow was a little embarrassed. They came quite close, but he did not feel them at all. He told the Master to remain silent for now. The stone in the Master's hand split into several pieces. This greatly upset the Master. He had only recently repaired it, and now it was broken again. Lapis muttered in surprise, "Black Mage." He added that he was absolutely sure of this. He remembered what he looked like from their last meeting. Linus, having heard about the Black Mage, used his ring to activate the shackles of Belinda's spell, and under the stunned gaze of his friends, he struck the Black Mage with it. Blow easily repelled the attack. He thought that he had blocked the blow, of course. But what was that anyway? Cyndia and Lapis also looked at Linus with bewilderment. He said that Lapis was right. He really was the Black Mage. Chevla and Dio found themselves next to each other after teleportation. Chevla said irritably, "Why should he hang around here and on foot in the company of this brat?" Dio hoped that Rude would come soon and save him. Suddenly a man appeared from behind the trees. Dio recognized him and shouted, "Professor Hale." Professor Hale emerged from the forest and said with relief that he was glad they were okay. Chevla rushed to him and asked what had happened and if he was injured. Hale replied that he was fine, but that he himself did not understand what was happening. He was going to check the teleportation circle when he was attacked by a man in black clothes. Everything happened so fast. When he came to, he was already here. Chevla asked what was wrong with the other students and added that apparently the one who attacked him was the same guy who appeared in front of them. He added that he didn't know what exactly he did, but he thought that everyone who was there ended up in that place. Professor Hale said that everything was very bad. Something dangerous could happen, so we needed to hurry and find the rest of the students. Chevla asked him where they were anyway. The professor replied that it was. Princess Jutiarinen asked again, "Was it really Ishuela?" Tessiana confirmed that this is the cursed land. Professor Khan intervened and stated that there were no monsters in Ishuel. Then it turns out that it has something to do with the guy who sent them here. Tessiana suddenly heard some noise and prepared for battle. She grabbed Damien by the collar and said that Yuti was the princess of the empire. He must protect her. He is responsible for her. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared in front of them. Tessiana prepared to defend herself. The monster rushed at them with a terrible roar. Blow stated that he actually had a secret mission here. Linus said enthusiastically that he understood everything. This was to be expected from the Black Mage. Lapis asked him if Mr. Black Mage remembered him by chance. They met at the auction. Looking at the students' animated faces, he wondered if they really didn't care where they were and what was wrong with them. He sternly asked what students like them were doing here, hoping that they would finally realize the seriousness of the situation. Linus said that he had to in order to finally meet him, but Lapis pushed him aside and began to explain. While they were preparing for the lesson, a black figure appeared and black water gushed out from the teleportation circle. It was probably the water that brought them here. Lapis added that he didn't know why this happened. They were supposed to go to the tower, but ended up in this unknown place. Blow reminded them that he had already told them that this was Ishuela, but Lapis said that as far as he knew, there were no monsters in Ishuela. Blow said that was true, but he seemed to understand what was happening, and as a magician, he could not stay away. The students looked at him in amazement. Blow thought it would be natural to intervene now and declared that it was his duty to help them. Linus introduced himself solemnly and said that his name was Linus Engrium. Lapis pushed him away again and stated that he was Lapis Yuan Nuadli. Master Mage could call him Lapis. The third member of their team introduced herself as Cyndia Mars. Although Rudd considered these sudden glorifications unnecessary, he introduced himself as a magician from Opian Blow. Linus immediately asked if he could address him as Mr. Blow. Blow agreed. Then he asked Linus if there was a magic stone in his ring, and he replied, yes. Blow said there are monsters everywhere here. They don't know yet what else can happen, so he asked them to take everything very seriously. He asked if Linus had enough mana in the magic stone, and he, without listening to the words, mechanically answered affirmatively to all the questions. Lapis had a preventive talk with him and, apologizing for him, said that he was not usually like this. Blow asked him to give the ring to him. Linus happily extended his hands to him. Blow took the ring from him without further ado, and charge it with your mana. He then demanded that Cyndia give him her magical weapon. Blow returned their magic items to them, saying that he had recharged them and that it would last for a while. Suddenly he felt the earth begin to shake. Blow advised the students to move away. He said that something big was approaching them. A huge monster appeared before them. Damien, with the princess in his arms, tried to escape from the approaching monster. Seeing the size of the monster, he called out in alarm, "Professor Rowell!" Tessiana blocked the monster's path, and she rushed to attack him. She launched a powerful attack and defeated the monster. The princess and Damien watched the fight. Having dealt with the monster, Tessiana approached them. The princess rushed towards her, shouting that she knew Tessie was incredible. Suddenly there was a loud roar, and they saw the wounded monster burrowing into the ground. Tessiana said that we need to pursue him. She picked up Princess Jutiarinen in her arms and ran, Damien following them. Cheval Dio and Professor Hale were in a gorge between the rocks. Professor Hale used a magic spell. Cheval asked him, "Is this tracking magic?" Hale answered in the affirmative and explained that with her help, they would be able to locate the rest of the students. Fire separated from the magical seal created by Professor Hale. He took off and quickly flew beyond the tails. The professor said that we need to follow the fire faster. Chevle and Dio ran after him. The huge monster was literally torn to pieces. Blow took him down without much difficulty. He thought it was a mid-level creature, so he'd probably have to speed up. Lapis, who was watching the fight, shouted in delight that he had destroyed it with one blow. It was incredible. Linus said, "Is he really not sleeping?" Blow thought he needed to move faster. It would be easier alone. Suddenly, he felt an impending danger, and he rushed towards the students. He grabbed Lapis by the collar, and he threw it high into the air. The remaining students watched his flight in amazement, but soon they set off after him. The place where they were standing suddenly opened up, and from there a huge monster appeared. Lapis was closest to the monster, and Blow grabbed him by the collar again. Linus and Cyndia landed safely on the ground. Linus said that it turns out there was another monster. The Black Mage and Lapis landed nearby on a rock. Blow asked Lapis if he was okay, and he replied that he was perfectly fine. Blow looked closely at the monster and felt a familiar aura near it. It was Lady Tessiana. The Black Mage and Professor Rowell stared at each other. The main group of students looked anxious, and there was increasing talk about what they would do if no one came. Yell said quietly, she wondered how much longer they would have to wait here. Suddenly, a light flew through the crowd of students, and soon Professor Hale appeared, followed by Chevle and Dio. Seeing the professor, the students rejoiced and thought that they were saved. Dio looked at the crowd and shouted loudly, "Arcean!" Finally, he found Lidorsis with his eyes and rushed towards him. Dio asked him how he was. Lidorsis did not answer. Dio looked around and asked if Ruda hadn't been removed, and Rin wasn't visible either. But Lidorsis remained silent. Professor Hale approached them and asked what was the matter. Looking at Ardean, he said that he seemed to be shocked. The more serious the situation, the more important it is to maintain composure. The professor added that, ultimately, everything was for his own good. Hale said the most important thing now is to find the rest of the students, so they need to move on. Looking closely at Lidorsis, Dio asked what had just happened between them. Lady Tessina continued to look closely at the Black Mage. Her look was rather suspicious. Suddenly, she released magical power, and she rushed to attack him. Blow tried to stop her, but to no avail. He was forced to dodge her blows. Lady Tessiana continued to press him desperately. Lapis tried to defend himself as best he could from the streams of magic caused by the battle. Linus and Cyndia watched in surprise as the battle suddenly erupted. Blow parried Tessiana's sword strike with his spear. He stated that she needed to calm down first and said that they needed to talk. Tessiana looked at him again carefully. She said she had definitely seen him somewhere before. Who is he anyway? Lapis intervened in their fight and asked Professor Rowell what she was doing. The Black Mage was trying to help them. Linus also confirmed that it was true and said how could she be so rude to their benefactor. But Tensiana looked at them with irritation, and they retreated in fear. Blow wondered if she really recognized him. Then Damien appeared with the princess. He asked Lapis if by Black Mage he meant the Opionian, the Black Mage from Opion. Blow recognized Professor Khan and confirmed that he was the same magician from Opion. Professor Khan enthusiastically declared that he had heard about him, but was surprised that the Black Mage really turned out to be a youth. He was so young. But still, how did it happen that he ended up here? Blow hesitated a bit and stated that he had been sent to Ishuela on a top-secret mission and had met these students by chance. They seemed worried to him, and after their story about what happened, he decided to help them. They didn't mind. Professor Khan replied that of course not. They should ask him for help, and they even dared to hope that he himself would offer it. The professor, not noticing the black smoke gathering behind him, added that if they reached Helios, they would definitely thank him. Blow shouted to him that there was danger behind him. Professor Khan finally saw the black smoke and tried to dodge it with the princess in his arms. Blow stepped between him and the haze and pushed it away. Tessiana cried out in alarm, "Yuti," and rushed forward. The black smoke gradually began to thicken into an ominous figure. Blow and Tessiana watched the transformation closely. The smoke eventually formed into the black entity familiar to Blow, which caused them trouble when teleporting. Nevertheless, he pretended to see the entity for the first time and asked Tessiana what it was. After the professor appeared, the panic among the students subsided. They decided that he was here to save them, and now they were safe. Eel thought that after the professor arrived, they had nothing to worry about and they could try to find those who had separated. However, looking at the professor, for some reason she felt a strong sense of unease. Dio asked the students about Rude, but none of the students had seen him. He wondered where he could be. Hearing his questions, Isle asked him if Rudd hadn't been with them when they were transported. Dio replied that they were separated during the transfer and now he doesn't know where he is. Ardian still hasn't said anything. Dio noticed that the professor was also acting strangely. El had similar thoughts. Suddenly, Professor Hale said, "Okay, it looks like everyone they need is here, so we won't look any further." There were surprised conversations about the fact that not all the students were here. Dio shouted that Rude and Rin weren't here. They couldn't stop searching. Someone asked that there weren't many more here. Shouldn't they find everyone? The professor replied that since there was no sign of them, they were most likely already dead. The students looked at him in surprise. What is he even talking about? Professor Hale summoned magical fire and declared that they had had a little more luck. The students felt the ground beneath them shake. The huge chunk of land they were on became enveloped in glowing lines and began to rise. The professor looked at the students with a smile, and he said that perhaps they would live until the very end. A stranger in black with glowing blue eyes appeared before Blow and the others. Professor Khan shouted at the Black Mage that it was the bastard who had moved them here. Rudd was surprised that he came to them himself, that he had such an interesting idea. Suddenly everyone felt the ground beneath them shake. Lapis asked what it was, if it was an earthquake. A huge rock, shrouded in fiery lines, slowly rose above the area. Tessiana and Professor Khan watched the events with the princess. Blow thought that he was planning to do something in that place, so he needed to hurry. If he showed up himself, it means he's trying to stop them from going there. The black entity told Blow that this is where he would meet his death. Blow replied that we'll see who wins. He thought that Lidorsis was probably there. Suddenly, a huge stone monster appeared behind the black entity, stretching out huge stone hands towards Blow and the others. Tessiana prepared to defend herself. Blow rushed forward and destroyed the stone monster with a powerful magical attack. Tessiana and Professor Khan watched the fight. Blow decided that until he found what was creating this mass of mana, there was no point in fighting it. So he shouted at Professor Rowell that he was leaving it to her. The black entity roared, "How dare he!" and rushed at him. But Tessiana blocked his path and stood in front of Blow. She told him to go where he needed to go. She then turned to the black entity and stated that it concerned him. Then it won't pass, and she entered into battle with him. Blow thought that if she could fight Shikmone, then he had nothing to worry about. And he ran towards the rock, entangled in luminous lines. The students were shouting that the earth had moved, that something was happening. Chevla looked suspiciously at Professor Hale and asked if he was one of those who did this. Professor Hale said yes, that's right. Dio asked how he could. Professor Hale replied that he had a reason for it. He called everyone's attention and said that although they might be shocked, They should consider it a valuable experience. Although their training in the tower did not take place, being exposed to real combat conditions will be much more beneficial for their learning. Dio asked again in surprise. A real fight. El said that he was definitely crazy. The professor said he had to warn everyone to try their best. With a clot of mana, the professor grabbed Dio by the neck and pulled him out of the crowd. The students watched this with alarm. The professor said that he always believed that useless people should not be left alive in this world. This guy Dio Varus is a nobody with no right to live. Hale asked the students what they should do with him. Shevla shouted what he was doing and demanded that it stop immediately. Professor Hale told Fidelio that he had made a mistake. He then threw Dio off the cliff. Lidorsus rushed at the professor in anger, but he was easily thrown back by him. Professor Hale said he advised everyone not to do anything stupid as the real lecture had not yet begun. Hale looked down and said that Dio Varus was nowhere to be seen. He expressed regret that he had not been of much use in this life. He then said that he hoped that the others would not be so useless and would do their best. The stone monster shattered into pieces once again. Damien said that no matter how many times he destroyed it, it would be restored again. As he thought, this needed to be dealt with first. He shouted to Professor Rowell, who was fighting the black entity, to try her best. The stone monster recovered again and began to advance towards Damien and the princess. He put up a magical protective seal, but he felt that it would not last long. Damien shouted to the students of Carace to get ready. They had an emergency. Cindy took out her weapon. It turned out to be an object similar to an ordinary shelf, which surprised Lapis. Lapis also called out to Linus, who didn't move. But he was in a depressed state and weakly said that the black mage had left. Lapis shouted at him that now was not the time to think about it. The stone monster dealt a blow that sent Lapis flying far to the side. Damien shouted, "Heroes, they are the last line of defense." Cyndia activated her magic stick and cast a spell, Unimayan Belomozarin. She launched a powerful magical attack on the monster. The magical power she summoned surprised not only Damien, but also the Black Essence who was fighting Tessiana. The stone monster became covered with cracks and crumbled into small pieces. Linus whispered thoughtfully that the flying stones had turned to dust. Cyndia seemed surprised by the power of her own attack. Professor Khan asked in astonishment what it was. Cyndia silently demonstrated her magical weapon. Lapis said that this is black mana. Could this really be the magical power of the black mage? Hearing about black mana, Linus looked thoughtfully at his ring with the magic stone. Lapis explained to the others that it was a magic stone that the black mage had charged. He thought that black mage Mr. Blow was really incredible. If they had such power, they could help the professors. Lapis said he was no use himself, but Linus had to help too. But Linus only waved his hand sheepishly, and he hurried to move away from his companions. They looked at him reproachfully. Blow made his way to where the rest of the students were. He had a bad feeling, so he tried to move faster. Blow didn't notice that a strange man with multicolored eyes was watching him from a tree branch. The flying stones began to gather into a stone monster again. Professor Khan shouted at the Herays that now was not the time for games. But Linus said that he was very sorry, but he couldn't use his mana, even if he was considered as useless as Lapis. Lapis was indignant and shouted back, asking what kind of nonsense he was talking at such a moment. But Linus kept saying that he couldn't use it, he would keep it until he died, for which Cyndia called him a crazy idiot. The paws of the stone monster loomed over them. Damien yelled at Linus to stop messing around and pull himself together. The monster's paw struck nearby and sent Linus and Lapis flying. Lapis asked if he still refused to use his mana, but he replied that he couldn't. Lapis continued to press him. He wants them to die here. He plans to drag them all to the bottom along with himself. Linus replied that they must survive. Suddenly, a magical beam flashed next to them. Anna appeared next to them out of nowhere. She declared, wrapping streams of mana around the monster, that she would bind it to her will. Anna stood in front of them, trying her best to hold back the monster. Linus and Lapis looked at her in surprise. Anna turned around and addressed the two of them, after which she collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Such a powerful spell had taken all her strength. Linus and Lapis leaned over the girl with concern. The stone hand loomed over them again. Lapis called Linus. He sighed that nothing could be done, and he prepared to cast spells to release mana from the ring. The monster's stone hand struck them, and Linus realized that he didn't have time to block her. Suddenly there was a terrible roar and the monster fell apart again. Cyndia turned around, thinking that it was Linus who used the black mage's mana. But it was Lapis. He was literally glowing with mana. Linus said it was amazing how he did it, But Lapis himself was confused and did not understand what had happened. Suddenly he remembered the tattoo Runa had made and looked at his chest. One of the 3 engraved hearts was gone. He had used it. Linus leaned over Anna and asked if she was okay. She nodded and asked where Chevla was. Cheval clutched the magic stone of his pendant and asked Hale why he was doing this to them, what he wanted from them. The professor replied that who knows what he really wants from everyone, maybe Hadelio will try to guess. Cheval stated that whatever it was, he would not give it up just like that. Professor Hale chuckled and said how touching it was. Chevla suddenly felt that the magic stone in his pendant began to activate regardless of his wishes. He could no longer control it. Professor Hale said, "Let me borrow your power for a little while." Chevla von Hadelio was engulfed in a powerful stream of magic. His eyes lit up. The students were seized with panic. Lidorsis watched what was happening in horror. The thought that it was his fault overwhelmed him. All this is done for his sake. It's all his fault. Rin and her friend hid among the rocks from a monster passing by. She thought it looked like they had been sent to some terrible place. I wonder if the others are okay. Camilla wanted to ask something, but Rin told her to shut up. She heard some noise and looked in his direction. Suddenly, a monster looked into their shelter among the stones. Rin thought they needed to run, but her friend Camilla fainted from fear. Rin prepared to defend herself to the last. She didn't see that high in the sky above them, a blue dragon was soaring. The monster came close to the girls, but then a powerful blow fell from the sky on the monster and it disappeared. Rin looked up, stunned. She saw a huge dragon soaring in the sky, carrying a monster in its claws. The dragon circled above them and flew away into the distance. Rin watched him go, still not understanding what had just happened. Blow's path was blocked by a high cliff. He assessed her with his eyes and wondered if he could climb up here. He thought about what was going on there. His friends from Helios were probably there now. Blow thought that if something happened, he wouldn't just let it go. Suddenly, a strange young man blocked his path. He had different colored eyes and asked where he was going. Lapis held back the stone monster with the last of his strength. Professor Khan called everyone over and said that they needed to create a barrier even if it took a lot of mana. Linus cheerfully reported that everything was fine. They were safe as long as Lapis covered their back. Professor Khan thought that he couldn't use his full power while Professor Rowell was here, so he needed to create a protective barrier first. Suddenly, a strange glow appeared behind them. Lapis screamed that it was a magic circle. A man emerged from the magic circle and declared that the air here was still disgusting. Several more people appeared from the circle. One of them said that he had not noticed it. In any case, they will have to break through the barrier. Professor Khan said in surprise that Marquis Hadelio and the mages from the tower had appeared. One of the new arrivals also recognized Professor Khan and rushed to him, asking what had happened and where the students were. By that time, the stone monster had recovered again and rushed to attack. Professor Rowell blocked his way. Marquis Hadelio asked what it was. Another mage replied that it looked like someone had poured mana into the stone and made a puppet. Hadelio clarified that he didn't mean the stone monster, but that thing over there, and he pointed to the black entity. Then the Marquis ordered everyone to retreat. He said how could they claim the greatness of Helios if they were unable to solve even such a trivial problem? Hadelio also told Tessiana that she would have to answer for dragging Princess Jutiarinen into such a dangerous situation. Tessiana responded with contemptuous silence. The magician pointed to something behind the Marquis and told him to turn around. But Hadelio calmly stated that he also had eyes on the back of his head. He snapped his fingers and a protective magical seal appeared behind his back. Tessiana and the others watched his actions. The Marquis asked where his son and other students had gone, and he looked gloomily at the black entity. Chevla, meanwhile, stood enveloped in a glowing column of mana. The students watched in bewilderment as the mana drained from them. Professor Hale said that he would now tell us what the essence of their lesson was. The goal of today's lesson is to win the fight against Chevla von Hadelio. 2 huge wolves made of mana appeared next to Chevle. The professor assured that they would certainly not fight with bare hands. He would provide them with weapons. No more rules. Let them show him what they can do. However, if they fail this lesson, they will lose their lives. So if they want to live, they must fight with all their might. Chevle's eyes were shining. He couldn't control his body, but memories flashed through his head. The little girl with golden hair said, "Brother Chevle." She spoke to the boy with a thoughtful look who was sitting with her in the carriage. She asked what he was thinking about. They would be arriving any minute. They were approaching the mansion of Duke Ardian. Little Chevle said that he would finally see Lido, or whatever his name was. In general, he would meet him. The girl called him a blockhead and said his name was Lidorsis. She added that this time she would definitely become friends with Lidorsis. The brother and sister were warmly welcomed at the Duke's mansion. Young Master Ardian greeted them and shook Chevla's hand, saying that he was glad to see him again. Chevla said mutually. He wanted to introduce his sister to him, but she had already turned away from them. She saw a little boy hiding nearby and ran towards him shouting, "Lidorsis!" Chevla shouted indignantly, turning to Ibriel, asking why she was running away. He apologized to young Ardian and said that she was quite nimble. He said that it was nothing to worry about and said that it was nice to look at. Ibriel and Lidorsis sat comfortably on a blanket in the garden. Chevla thought he didn't see anything funny about it. They are both of the Ardian line, but Lidorsis is not at all like his older brother. However, he decided that he didn't like either of them. Chevla approached Lidorsis and Ibriel, who were sitting on the blanket. Lidorsis looked at him strangely. Chevla thought what a strange reaction this was and asked his sister if it was time for them to go home. Ibriel was indignant and reproached him for not even greeting Lidorsis properly, and now he wanted them to return home. Chevla said ominously, "Well, hello, nice to see you." Lidorsis didn't get the joke and got scared. Ibriel called him a fool again and told him to say hello properly. But Lidorsis had already run away. Tears appeared in Ibriel's eyes, and Chevla thought that he had done something wrong. He went to look for Lidorsis, but the little one was nowhere to be found. Chevla remembered how his sister said that she would not go home if he did not find Lidorsis. Then young Ardian called out to him. He asked what happened, because he said that he had to go. Chevla replied that Ibriel wanted to say goodbye to his brother before leaving, but he was nowhere to be seen and he didn't know where he was. Young Ardian asked if he meant the fox. Chevla replied that yes, he was looking for his brother Lidorsis. Ardian said that he liked to spend time alone, so he had no idea where he was, probably hiding somewhere. He added that he wanted to give him some advice. Don't get too close to the fox, because in reality, this guy is not his brother, he is a monster. After which, young Ardian left with his companion. Chevla looked after him, puzzled, wondering what he was even talking about. Maybe he's gone crazy. Lidorsis is his only sibling and he calls him a monster. How could he say such a thing? Chevla saw Lidorsis lying on the ground. He became worried, thinking that something had happened to him. But I saw that he was just sleeping. He sat down next to him and wondered why the Duke's second son was sleeping on the ground as if he didn't care. How did he become like this? Maybe it's because of his older brother. He is his younger brother. He is smaller and weaker. Shouldn't he protect and take care of him, as is proper in the family? Chevla saw that Lidorsis had woken up. He tried to talk to him, but Lidorsis jumped up and tried to run away again. Chevla shouted at him that he was at it again. When people try to talk to him, he always runs away. Where do they teach such things? Lidorsis suddenly stopped, turned to Chevla and said, "Hello," but then he ran away again. Chevla rushed after him, shouting if he knew what he had to go through to meet him, why he was running away again without saying a word. Then suddenly Ibriel appeared and angrily asked what they were doing. She rushed to pull Chevla away from Lidorsis. Marquis Hadelio was surprised to hear that they wanted to go to the Ardians again. He asked if they wanted to stay and live there. Ibriel asked if it was possible. The Marquis said that today at the council he had to listen to so many complaints from the Duke, and the children have no idea what their father feels. Idriel and Lidorsis held hands, and Chevla watched them. They began to visit the Ardians frequently, and play Three of Us. Chevla noticed that the Duke's first son no longer came to meet them. Although they have been coming here frequently lately, and in general, they did not come for him. That day, the three of them met again. Lidorsis said, "Hello." Chevla looked at him and thought that it would be great if he were his brother. He greeted her warmly in return. Hadelio came out of his reverie and heard someone speaking to him. This was the first son of Duke Ardian. He asked where his sister was. Chevla replied that she was now with Lidorsis. Ardian said dejectedly that he had not followed his advice. Chevla asked in response why he spoke like that about his brother. He added that he was not bothered by the nonsense he had said, but as far as he understood, he should stay away from him. With these words, he turned around and left. Chevla recalled that this is exactly how it happened. He couldn't forget what he saw then. Lidorsis in clouds of black smoke, and his sister lying in a pool of blood. They say it was someone who had a grudge against the Ardians, and once the monster was able to get into the estate, and the victim was the innocent daughter of Hadelio. They say that the youngest son of the Duke, who was next to her, did not have a single scratch on him. Chevla thought he was right. They shouldn't have gotten close to him. I should have stayed away from him. It was all his fault. It was because of him that Ibriel happened. Marquis Hadelio said that Lidorsis was not guilty of anything. He understands that. But Chevla thought that he had lost the person he valued more than anything else in the world. So who was he to blame? When Anna approached Chevla, he said that this upstart is in Helios. We need to greet him. He told her to clear the library and gather everyone to give him a warm welcome. Cheval and Lidorsis met in the corridor. They looked at each other in silence for a while. Lidorsis tried to say something, but Chevely interrupted him. He stated that his brother told him that he was not his brother, but a monster. He added that, frankly speaking, he agreed with him. Chevely moved on, leaving Lidorsis alone. Chevely and Lidorsis looked at each other again. There were two mana wolves standing next to Chevely. A strange magical seal shone above the group of students, from which weapons and mana spheres rained down. Professor Hale said that they could use weapons and magic circles. He would give them time, but they should prepare faster. Chevely waited silently. The students were in panic. Was he serious? How could they fight? They have no chance against him. They need to run. Isle asked where they were going to run. They wanted to jump off a cliff. They have nowhere to run. She held up the monosphere and said that was all they could do for now. This is to fight. Yell thought that she refused to die in this place until she met him. Chevely von Hadelio is not a battle mage. He specializes in illusion magic, so these monsters are probably just an illusion. The problem is that Hadelio is not himself right now. It's like he has no will of his own. What the hell did Professor Hale do to him? Professor Hale declared that they had wasted their time on idle chatter, and that giving them a head start was simply a waste. He said that he saw no point in delaying it any further and gave the command to Chevely to begin. Chevely directed his magical wolves at the students. They started running in fear. Yell said that they were idiots. Why were they even listening? There was nowhere to run. Isle thought that she was now on her own and prepared to fight, but suddenly Lidorsis appeared in front of her, protecting her from the wolves. Blow struck at the figure blocking his path. He dodged and said that it was impudent to attack without any warning. Blow looked at him silently. The man with multicolored eyes asked. It seemed he needed to go up. Blow wondered where he came from. He didn't even notice his presence, and asked who he was. He was in cahoots with the one who arranged all this. The strange man objected with an offended expression. How could he even say such a thing? He would never have sided with that traitor. Blow thought about his words about the traitor. The man with different colored eyes said that if he was going up there to save people, it might be a bit difficult. He must find out what this traitor is going to do with those people. Although apparently he is going to kill them all, but why? After all, killing a couple of bugs is a mere trifle. Blow attacked the strange creature without further ado. Using his mana spear, he grabbed it. Blow said that if he didn't want to get crushed by this bug, he'd better answer straight out. If he calls him a traitor, it means they were once allies. Therefore, it is better to tell him everything he knows, down to the last detail. The magical wolves rushed towards Lidorsis and Isle. Yell grabbed Lidorsis' hand, and together with him, she dodged the monster's attacks. She activated the mana sphere and cast spells. The wolves were entangled in magical lines and stopped. Eel pounced on Lidorsis and screamed, "What is he doing? He has gone crazy. Why did he rush headlong, deciding to die?" Lidorsis replied that if he died, everything would stop. Eel was outraged that he was talking about how his death would change absolutely nothing, just like Dio's death. His death will be completely meaningless. The monsters remained motionless in magical bonds. Professor Hale stated that he was amazed. It was incredible that Aiden's student could perform containment magic of such a level. Eel thought that, judging by the way they dealt with her magic, those creatures were real, not just an illusion. Hale added that the duration still needs some work. The monsters gradually began to free themselves from their magical bonds. Yell thought that this was the limit of what she could do with her magic. She needed to think of another way. It would be better to attack the caster and disrupt the magical flow. The magical wolves finally broke free and rushed at her again. Yell cast the protective spell again. The monsters froze. Yell thought that this would only buy her a little time, as she thought acting alone was not very effective. Suddenly, one of the students stood next to Isle. She said that she didn't want to admit it, but she was right. They had nowhere to run. They had no choice but to fight them. The girl shouted loudly that she entered Helios to become a magician, like everyone else, right? If they become real magicians, they will have to face the same dangerous situations. Are they really planning to run away without doing anything? The students became inspired. Many began to grab weapons and say that they had to show what they were capable of. Professor Hale said this was not what he expected. He told Chevely that he thought he could do better. Maybe he doesn't want to harm these children. The professor told Hadelio that one way or another he had disappointed him. Suddenly, Hale received a mental message that time was running out and he needed to hurry. The professor told the students that he would like to spend more time with them, but it was time to wrap up. Isle said that he called off the monsters. What was he planning? Professor Hale said that although they were finished, they would not have died in vain, but would have learned a vivid and useful life lesson. Hale said his name was Venus and activated Awakening. The students watched his transformation in amazement. Yell said that this couldn't be. Hale said it was a wonderful feeling, an unimaginable delight. He finally managed to go beyond the boundaries of human capabilities. Isle, who was watching him closely, said that it was a demon. Hale said they should take a good look at this magnificent spectacle. The transformed professor stood before a crowd of students. He asked what he should do with them. Maybe line them up and throw them off the cliff one by one, or break their arms and legs and leave them to die in agony, whichever they prefer. Hale stated that he was eager to kill them all in a quick but interesting way. Yell said it felt like a nightmare. Professor Hale said he would begin the purge with the most worthless. He told Fidelio that he was going to use it, but in the end, it all turned out so annoying. He threw Chevley off the cliff, under the frightened glances of the students. He threw Chevley off the cliff. Professor Hale and Yale watched him go, but suddenly someone grabbed Chevle by the hand. This would be Lidorsis. He held Chevle, who was hanging over the abyss. The man with different colored eyes was thrown back. He said it was quite surprising, and he looked at Blow. He said that he could consider himself lucky. The strange man muttered that it was all very curious. He simply adored the human world. It seems unlikely that everything will go exactly as he planned. Lidorsis was still holding Chevle's hand. Hale said he didn't expect that out of everyone present, he would be the one to rush to save Fidelio. But he mocked and tormented him. It was he who made him solitary, everyone knows that. Lidorsis muttered that he would not let him go no matter what. He will never lose anyone again like he did then. Lidorsis remembered that lunch with his older brother. Then he asked why he didn't eat anything. Did he really not like having lunch with him? Lidorsis did not answer. The brother said indifferently, "Oh well," and said that he had heard that beautiful flowers had blossomed in the depths of the hyacinth garden. He asked, "Her name is Ibriel, she would probably really like them. Because they are very beautiful, he should show them to her." The flowers were really very beautiful. Lidorsis and Ibriel looked at them holding hands. Ibriel began to pick flowers, not noticing that a black haze was beginning to thicken above them. Suddenly, streams of black smoke engulfed her. There was a loud explosion, throwing Lidorsis back. When the dust cleared, a huge monster appeared, holding Ibriel in its hand. Lidorsis looked at this terrible spectacle, but he couldn't help. Lidorsis continued to squeeze Chevle's hand, keeping him from falling down. The magic stone in Chevle's pendant suddenly cracked. Chevle's gaze became normal. He began to come to his senses. He said, "What the hell is going on?" Finally, he realized the situation he was in and asked Lidorsis not to let him go. Hale, who was watching them, said that thanks to Ardian he had come up with something funny, he would definitely like it. He told Ardian that he would give him a choice. If he lets go of Fidelio's hand, the rest of the students will survive. But if he decides to save him, then these boulders will crush everyone and they will die. So what will he choose? He will save them or Fidelio. Professor Hale ordered Lidorsis to choose. Lidorsis said that he would not let go. Chevle said irritably, "What a nasty thing." He turned to Lidorsis, calling him a non-entity. Does he really think he is the winner? He humiliated him endlessly, calling him a monster. Doesn't he like seeing him in this position? He asked Lidorsis why he was hesitating. To leave him alone. He doesn't need help from someone like him. Lidorsis replied that he did not want to. He remembered Ibriel telling him why her brother always said things that weren't on his mind. She hated him for it. Lidorsis asked again if she really hated him. Ibriel replied that of course not. Actually, she loves her brother more than anyone in the world, but it's a secret. He shouldn't tell anyone about it. That's why she wants the two people dear to her to become closer. They were interrupted by Chevle, who stated that he had searched them. They have gone too far with what they are doing, and Chevle suggested that they all return. Lidorsis then thought that these people were shining like the sun. Chevle continued to shout. Why the hell he didn't let him go? Did he really think that he would thank him for saving him? He would rather die than let him save him. But Lidorsis stubbornly replied that he did not want to, and asked him to hold on tighter. The other students watched this scene with mixed feelings. Professor Hale asked, so he chooses Fidelio. He will let everyone else die for the sake of one person. That is a questionable decision. Eel thought it was nonsense that he would spare everyone. Hale promised that if Ardian let go of his hand, he would spare the rest of the students. Isle thought it was nonsense that he would spare everyone. Chevle told Lidorsis that he was not a monster. He was just an idiot. But he continued to stubbornly hold on to it. Chevle said that he always played the fool and that what is happening now is not his fault. And then he wasn't guilty either. How long is he going to hold it? His hand is already going numb. He better let go. Lidorsis continued to stubbornly insist that he would never let him go. Shevla asked for forgiveness, and his hand unclenched. He flew down. Seeing Chevel fall, Hale told Lidorsis not to blame himself, since his choice had no bearing on anything anyway. He was going to kill everyone from the very beginning. The boulders hanging above the students began to fall. Yell looked up and wondered if this was the end. Suddenly, Lidorsis remembered what Rude had once told him. He then said that if he asked him for help, no matter what happened, he would help him in any way he could. A desperate Lidorsis said, "Rudd." Professor Hale looked at him mockingly. The stunned Lidorsis could not believe his eyes. Suddenly, Blow appeared, dragging Chevely along by the scruff of the neck. The stunned Lidorsis could not believe his eyes. Blow threw Chevla, who flew past Lidorsis and sprawled on the ground. Professor Hale was also puzzled by what was happening. Blow began to gather mana to launch a magical attack. He struck the boulders hanging over the students, shattering them into tiny pieces. Small stones and sand fell among the students without causing them any harm. Blow wondered if he was too late. He sat down next to the students and saw that they were okay. Lidorsis is fine too, but what the hell is that next to him? Blow turned to the students and asked if they were okay. They looked at him in surprise, not understanding who was in front of them. A strange, demonic-looking creature uttered a curse at him. Blow thought that it was from him that the wave of mana that he felt below came. Who he was. The creature screamed at him. How dare he interfere and promise to destroy him? With these words, he dealt a powerful blow to Blow. Blow parried the blow without difficulty. And with surprise, I thought that the energy of a magician was emanating from it. The creature said angrily that he was probably from the tower. He couldn't believe that he had come here so fearlessly. It added that it would make him regret it and dealt another blow. Blow ruined his attack again. He thought he had felt this mana before. Blow remembered a man who had such mana. It turns out that this creature is Professor Hale. Professor Hale said that if you think about it, he can do something. He entangled it with streams of his mana. However, no matter how skilled he was, would he be able to fight with dignity with such a burden behind his back? Hale stated that he noticed that he was quite capable of dodging his attacks, but preferred to take them on himself. This means that he is doing this only out of fear for these children. Hale chuckled and asked Blow if he had guessed correctly. Blow answered briefly, no. Hale said we'll see how long he can hold out then. He began to prepare a new, even more powerful attack. The professor said that he didn't have much time left, so he will wipe them all out with one blow. Il and the other students shouted that it was dangerous. Blow looked at the students and said he was sure they were all shocked. But there is nothing to worry about. There is no need to doubt. Turning to the professor, he said that he seemed to have misunderstood something. There is no reason why he doesn't dodge his attacks. He simply doesn't need it. Blow asked the professor if he understood what he was talking about. With one movement, he freed himself from the bonds that were enveloping him. Professor Hale said that he was not an ordinary person. He was not like the magician from the tower. This aura and black clothes. Hale stated that he had heard of him. He is the same young magician who single-handedly defeated the monsters from the gate. That same opium-black magician. The students were shocked to hear Hale's words. Could this really be the famous black magician? Blow didn't deny it. He said yes, so what? Professor Hale laughed evilly and asked what the black mage from Opium was doing here. However, if he really is a black mage, his death will be proof of his strength. The students felt inspired. If he really was the black mage, then they were saved. The black magician will definitely save them. Il thought that this man right in front of her reminded her of someone. The professor released a new powerful stream of mana. A wave of mana rolled through the students. Blow blocked most of that wave. Professor Hale laughed ominously. Blow thought that not only his appearance had changed, but also his aura. Hale stated that mana was coursing through his entire body, a force that obeyed his will. No one can comprehend this magnificent feeling, which has no equal. Professor Hale directed streams of his newfound power at Blow. He said mockingly, "What's the matter, Black Mage?" He became somehow nervous. Where did all his confidence go? Blow thought that Hale's attention was on him now, but if he aimed at the students, he can hardly protect them all. Hale mockingly asked why he was silent. He swallowed his tongue. Did it dawn on him who was in front of him? Blow said he was talking too much. He decided not to drag it out, but something was bothering him. Who was it that made Professor Helios such a monster? He must find who is behind all this. Hale shouted that he was an insolent upstart for daring to oppose him. He attacked the Black Mage with magical seals. Blow disappeared in the cloud of a powerful explosion. Hale said there was no point in talking to someone who already had one foot in the grave. However, Blow managed to repel his attack. The professor prepared another attack and shouted that he could not withstand this blow. He screamed, "Die!" and dealt a powerful blow, sending rock fragments flying in all directions. The students were horrified. Professor Hale looked around and saw no one at the site of the impact. He stated that there was not even a trace left of him. But Blow said no and pounced on him from above. His blow was even stronger than the professor's. But Professor Hale doesn't know how to handle such power, and it seems he has little combat experience. His power doesn't suit him. Blow said that this mana is at least not inferior to the mana of the strongest mages. But Professor Hale doesn't know how to handle such power, and it seems he has little combat experience. His power doesn't suit him. Blue blood began to ooze from Hale's wounds, and Blow wondered why it was that color. Blow asked Hale who gave him this alien power. In the end, she couldn't do anything again. Isles said that the Black Mage had won, and she thought to herself how pathetic she was. In the end, she couldn't do anything again, just like then. However, Isles' thoughts were interrupted by the surprised cries of the students. She looked up at the sky and saw some strange flying creature approaching them. It was getting closer and closer. Eventually, everyone saw a huge blue dragon diving towards them. Professor Hale whispered that it was impossible for him to lose to someone like him. Blow told him to stop talking nonsense and answer his question. Then the blue dragon landed on the rock they were on. He looked at Blow and Professor Hale. Blow also looked at him, trying to understand what was going on. He decided that it was all quite scary. Looking at the dragon, Blow thought, "What a giant! What is this? There is no demonic energy emanating from it. He has never seen anything like it before." He decided that it was all quite scary. The dragon brought its head closer to him. Blow thought it looked like he was sniffing him, but wasn't that too close? Professor Hale perked up. He stated that the dragon was sent to help him. He screamed at Blow that no matter how strong he was only human and he would witness his slow demise. He urged the dragon to hurry, but the dragon suddenly grabbed Hale with its mouth. The students were stunned by this strange turn of events. The dragon soared upward, holding Professor Hale in its mouth, and flew away with him. Blow wanted to stop the dragon because he still didn't know anything, but he was already far away. In any case, it's bad. He still couldn't get any information. Then Blow saw that all the students were staring at him. In any case, it's bad. He still couldn't get any information. The students shouted in admiration, "Black Magician!" He thought that they were looking at him so strangely. The students shouted in admiration, "Black Magician!" They won. The Black Mage defeated Professor Hale and drove away that monster. He saved them. Bravo to the Black Mage. Blow was surprised and confused by this reaction. He thought that they were celebrating too soon. Professor Hale had disappeared, and the magic that supported this place would soon dissipate. But Blow looked with alarm at the magical lines that entangled the piece of rock on which the students were standing. He thought that they were celebrating too soon. Professor Hale had disappeared, and the magic that supported this place would soon dissipate. This means that everything here will soon collapse. He needs to take them to a safe place. Suddenly, a teleportation portal opened behind the students. Someone's voice said, "Thank heavens they found them." The students recoiled, not knowing what to expect from them. Someone's voice said, "Thank heavens they found them." The students greeted Professor Khan and Professor Rowell with joyful shouts. Seeing the students, Lapis was relieved to think that everyone was here. The students greeted Professor Khan and Professor Rowell with joyful shouts. He looked at Lidorsis and Chevle. He decided that it was time for him to leave. Meeting them now would be completely inopportune. He looked at him in surprise. How did the Black Mage know his name? Then he addressed Lidorsis by name. He looked at him in surprise. How did the Black Mage know his name? Blow said that since the other mages were here, he would be safe. But it is dangerous to stay alone, so he had better hurry to the other students. O said goodbye and left, but Lidorsis tried to stop him. Marquise Hadelio stated that the students needed to be evacuated immediately and that they could use the teleporter they came through. But the magician replied that they couldn't. There were too many of them for such a modest teleport, and that new mana could be directed through the same paths. Professor Khan was indignant, and they talk about it so calmly. Marquise Hadelio stated that the students needed to be evacuated immediately and that they could use the teleporter they came through. But the magician replied that they couldn't. There were too many of them for such a modest teleport, and that new mana could be directed through the same paths. Marquise Hadelio was trying to find his son, and Linus was trying to find the Black Mage. The mage said that it was not possible to redirect mana to support the spell now. Another way would have to be found. Professor Rowell said there was such a way. When everything falls apart, they will let everyone fall. And then they'll just catch everyone. The magician and Professor Khan were surprised by this proposal, but agreed to it. The magician promised Marquis Hadelio that he would do everything in his power to find his son, but asked him to help them. He must destroy as many falling fragments as possible so that the children do not get hurt. Professor Rowell will help with this. If he accidentally misses any of the students, he asks her to intercept them. Professor Khan must provide the children with protective spells as much as possible. Even the simplest ones will do. Let the rest go down to ensure the children from there if they fall. The magician said that all this should work. He gives wings to children. Blow said that everything was happening faster than he thought. At this speed, the earth would collapse in the blink of an eye. He could help them. But then someone's hand grabbed his sleeve. It was Lidorsis. There were cries that the earth was collapsing. The magician gave the command to prepare for the operation. The piece of rock on which Blow, Chevla, and Lidorsis were sitting split and they fell down. Blow rushed after them to save them. The rest of the students also found themselves in the air. The magician shouted at them not to panic, to let the magic carry their bodies. Yell felt like she was floating in the air. She couldn't believe they had managed to cast so many spells in a matter of seconds. This is amazing. Floating in the air with everyone else, Isle thought that it still looked like it. Somehow idiotic. Blow managed to grab Chevla and Lidorsis and help them land safely. Blow saw that Lidorsis had lost consciousness. He thought he had screwed up pretty badly by calling Lidorsis by his first name, but nothing can be done about it now. It seemed like the others were okay. Blow decided that since the tower mages were here, he had nothing to worry about. Looking at the lying Chevla and Lidorsis, he thought that it was unlikely that this would be the end of it. He never managed to find out what they wanted, and he cannot guarantee that something similar will not happen again. Blow decided that he had to go back and tell the Duchess everything, and also report everything to the Master for the safety of Lidorsis. He remembered how the Master, when sending him to school, advised him to have a good rest and treat it like a vacation. He thought with a grin that the vacation had turned out to be so-so. Blow decided that now was the time to remove Awakening and join the others. He checked everything. There was no one nearby. He said that his name was Blow and completed the Awakening. Everything went well, and he became Rudd again. Looking at the clothes, he saw that, as he expected, everything had turned into rags. Rudd thought he would tell the others that he had briefly lost the creature, and then found the two of them unconscious. He looked at Lidorsis and Chevla, and he saw that Chevla was looking at him in amazement. Rudd said sullenly that it was necessary to make such a mistake, and asked Chevla what he saw. He came close to Chevla. He explained that he didn't even know why he was there. When he opened his eyes, he was standing right there. Rudd thought that he had seen everything after all, so he should probably bury him here. He came close to Chevla, and with a sweet smile, he said that they needed to talk. Chevla looked at him with horror. The magician stated that all the children were saved. They did an excellent job. The Marquis noticed that they were in a complete stupor. He told the magician to stop putting on airs and find his son quickly. The magician replied that there was no need to worry. They were already looking for him. They had already equipped a search party of about 50 ranger mages from the tower. The mage sleuths found other students scattered throughout the area. One of the mage trackers found Rin and her friend. He asked if she was okay and if there were any casualties. He said that he was from the tower, so she could relax. The mage sleuths found other students scattered throughout the area. All found students were teleported to a safe place. The chief magician asked if they had found the son of the Marquis of Hadelio, a tall man who likes to swear, meaning fair-haired. Marquis Hadelio stated that if something happened to his son, he would not let it go. The magician reassured him, saying that everything would be fine. The air here was not saturated with the smell of human blood. A man with multicolored eyes entered the cave and said that there was a foul smell of blood. He asked the person in the cave what he was doing there, whether he was eating or something. The man sitting in the cave, dressed in the uniform of a Helios student, did not answer. The guy with different colored eyes asked who he was looking for when he took on his true form after falling off the cliff, flickering here and there. He replied that he simply hadn't flown for a long time. It seems that many people saw his appearance, but it doesn't matter, it was of little use. But they met an interesting guy. Some annoying people might show up here, so you should take this guy to Ruby immediately. The man with multicolored eyes looked at the body lying on the ground and declared that he was dead. He said he should have at least breathed. After all, how would he explain to Ruby why he killed him? But the man in the school uniform told him to shut up. He said he killed him because he got it, he can give it to Ruby. He told the man with the different colored eyes, calling him Elsabel, that he was ready to listen to him. But he had better tone it down. She remembered the dragon who saved her. The students were waiting to return to Helios School. Rin looked up and noted that the sky was no longer red. She remembered the dragon who saved her. Rin wondered what it was. Camilla approached her and asked if she had heard the news. It turns out that the one who arranged all this was Professor Hale. Rudd said that couldn't be true when he heard from other students about Professor Hale. All the students said that he didn't deserve the title of professor, but he was their class teacher. What a horror. Rudd thought that after all this, Helios would have a hard time, and the school could have serious problems. Furthermore, Professor Hale is a criminal. Rudd saw Chevla von Hadelio talking to his father. He remembered talking to Chevla after leaving Awakening. He told him to listen carefully and remember. He was thrown out here alone. He was scared. He was confused. And then I found him in Lidorsis. After all, everything is clear to him. Rudd thought that it was a bit weak. He needed to be intimidated more strongly. But then the mages from the tower appeared. But it's okay. He won't start chatting about it left and right. Meanwhile, Marquise Hadelio was telling Chevla that no matter what his name was, Hale or Hell, he had to personally catch that bastard. They say that the Black Mage saved him. He will have to thank him when we meet. Chevla looked gloomily at Rude and thought that this couldn't be. This is complete nonsense. He is just a child. Unable to contain himself, Chevla swore loudly. Oset asked worriedly if he had hurt himself. Then Rudd suddenly remembered Dio. He asked the other students if anyone had seen him, if they hadn't found him yet. Why didn't he see him? But the students just looked away in embarrassment. Dio sat on a rock not far from them. One of the students began to explain something to him. But Rudd suddenly said that yes, here he is. Dio sat on a rock not far from them. He was holding his head. It looked like he had been hit pretty hard. The students asked in shock if he was okay. After all, he had fallen off a cliff. Dio said that when he woke up, he saw a magician in front of him and did not understand what had happened. The students wondered what happened then and who saved him. Maybe it was the Black Mage. Rude was surprised to hear the students' screams that Dio had been saved by the Black Mage. The students told Dio with relief that they were glad he was alive. They thought he was dead. Rude, looking at Dio, thought that it was good that he was okay, but he didn't save him. So who saved him then? The magicians announced that the teleport was ready. Everyone should gather. They were returning to Helios. The students cheered. Cyndia clutched her strange weapon, and Linus couldn't take his eyes off his magic ring. Princess Judy Aranen was under the care of Professor Rowell. Lidorsis lay in a van after the events he had experienced. Yell remembered the recent meeting. Will they meet again? The tower's ranger mages, searching the surrounding area, finally discovered Professor Hale's body. One of them said, "It's disgusting, Blue Blood." So he was not human. Another magician replied that this was not entirely true. He had once been one. But now it was not only about Helios. Palace of the Association of Magicians. Mr. Lanasta's secretary knocked on the office door, and having received permission to enter, she went inside. She asked if Mr. Lanast had received the report. He clarified whether it was a report about Shik's attack on Opian or about those good-for-nothings from the tower who decided to take a stroll around Ishuela. The secretary reported that there seemed to be problems at Helios, possibly because Princess Jutiaranen was studying there. But they urgently sent Marquise Hadelio to the tower. The secretary asked what their plan would be. Lanast ordered a meeting to be arranged with them. They could not remain aloof from such an interesting matter. At the Helios School Council meeting, the latest events were discussed. A week has already passed, but nothing has been done yet. Questions were raised about what they were going to do next. What they were even doing here, they just couldn't wait any longer. Duchess Artian stated that there was no point in waiting any longer. One of the council members supported her. If it comes to children's safety, they should do something and not sit idly by. Someone said they wouldn't leave their child here. Who can guarantee that this won't happen again in Helios? The school principal stated that she was forced to admit that they could not cope on their own. But while recognizing the exceptional nature of the situation, they valued their opinion. Therefore, Helios will immediately contact the tower so that they can help figure out what happened and fix everything. A special team will also be created for an internal investigation directly at the school. Children will not be informed about this so as not to disturb them. This will continue until all issues related to the incident are resolved, and until they are sure that there are no further risk factors, so there is no doubt. They will take care of it. Professor Khan, who was giving a lecture, suddenly stopped and looked into the depths of the classroom. The students followed his gaze. Rudd asked questioningly, "Professor?" Professor Rowell replied, "What?" Professor Rowell sat next to Rude and watched him closely. Professor Khan became indignant and demanded that Professor Rowell not disrupt his lecture. She replied that she was just watching, but Khan said that she was in the way and demanded that she leave. Rude thought Professor Rowell had noticed something. Rowell, Cheval von Hadelio, and Lidorsis, there's been something wrong with them ever since that day. Lidorsis is probably thinking about him, as he called him by name then. Rudd had already sent a report about this to the master, but there had been no news from him yet. Lapis asked again. A party. Linus confirmed that yes. Although it seemed a bit out of place now, there used to be a welcome party for newcomers at this time of year. Linus added that it was quite unexpected. He thought everyone would forget about it. Lapis said that everyone had returned, safe and sound, and that the party could be considered a celebration of their safe return, and the professors had given their approval. He added that it was like a dream. Linus asked what kind of dream. Lapis clarified that he meant Ishuela. Linus, looking at the magic rings on his hand, declared that it was not a dream at all. Lapis was indignant. Why did he have 2 magic stones? Isn't that against school rules? The rule is that each student, even if he is Cares, can only have 1 magic stone. But Linus replied that this was not a violation. The second stone was sealed, so it could not be used. Rudd asked again, a party? Rin replied that yes, and asked if they would go to see her. She explained that something bad had happened, and now everyone was trying to overshadow it with happy memories. Dio said that they would of course go, but Rude thought that he didn't want to, especially since he would soon be leaving here. He asked Rin if she would go herself. Rin was embarrassed and hesitated to answer. She looked at Lidorsis and said that she had been thinking about this for a long time. She then suggested cutting Ardian's hair a little and asked what he thought about it. Rin explained that it wasn't that his hair looked bad, it was just a good way to start fresh. She said that she didn't mean to offend anyone and asked to forgive her if she said too much. But Rudd stopped her. He put his hand on Lidorsis' shoulder and said it was a great idea. Rudd stated how he himself had not thought of this, and he suggested that Lidorsis do it right now. The master read Rudd's report on the incident in Helios. He said that he didn't send him there to get into such a mess. What a hassle. Ren suggested that since Blow had been spotted, wouldn't it be better for Rudu to return? But the master said there were offers from the tower to work together on this case, and he said Blow was currently away. So until he sorts all this out, it's better for him not to show up. Besides, he doesn't want Rudd to see what happened here. What if he goes crazy and does something similar in the association? The master said that, as he thought, the main target was Duke Ardian's second son. Then he asked Ren what the Duchess answered. Ren replied that she said she would head here after the meeting in Helios. The master said that he would then tell her everything in detail. When the haircut was finished, everyone stared at Lidorsis. Dio and Rude agreed that he looked great. Camilla asked why he hid his face under his hair for so long. He looks much better now. Rin said that she didn't actually say that she would cut the hair herself, but at least it turned out really well. Rudd reminded her that she had cut Ben's hair and praised her for a job well done. Rudd thought he looked much better now. Everything would be fine after he left. It was a great way to end things. He looked thoughtfully at Lidorsis once more and turned to Rin. He asked her when the party would be. Rudd thought that he should take full advantage of this opportunity, the chance to imprint into everyone's memory that Lidorsis was not a monster. Under cover of night, Rudd conducted another communication session with the master. The master said it was excellent. In any case, it turned out that he had carried out the Duchess's order flawlessly. Rudd asked if he could come back then. He was, of course, worried about Lidorsis, but he couldn't be with him forever. But the master replied, "Why such a rush? He could at least imagine how difficult it was to get him into this school. It would be better for him to stay there for now. In order for him to be able to leave there, he needs to go through some bureaucracy." Rudd asked if he was going to get him out of there. The master replied that of course, because he is the star of Opian. And by the way, he received a bunch of letters. They seemed to be from the students of Gilios to their savior, the Black Magician. Rudd told him to stop acting up and get him out of here as quickly as possible. The master suddenly said that he had not seen him for a long time and told him to take care of himself. Be careful there. Let him not forget that he is his precious family. So let him be more careful. Rudd said, "What's wrong with him? He's completely lost his mind." Returning to himself, he thought about how the master had a talent for making people feel uncomfortable. Why would he say such a thing? In any case, it looks like he'll have to stay here for a little while longer. Rudd thought that didn't sound so bad. Dio asked Rin how things were. Everyone was ready. Maybe they should go too. Let's wait a little longer. The main character comes last. Helios' students were getting ready for a party. Many people noticed Il Florin Chrome, who stood out noticeably from the other students. But Yell was bored. She was not interested in anyone here. There was a lot of talk about the Black Mage. It would be nice to become a mage like him. El thought with irritation that it was like a bazaar here. Rudd approached her and asked why everyone was only talking about the Black Mage. Yell replied that this is how it should be after the grinding. Rudd said that for some reason it seemed to him that everyone was looking only at her. He also looked closely at Yell. Rule said he had a favor to ask her and asked if she would listen to him. 3 figures appeared at the entrance to the hall. Even Isle was surprised to see them, not to mention the other students. Lidorsis entered the hall, accompanied by Rin and Dio. Yell waved her hand at them and shouted loudly, "Come here." She told Rudd that she simply agreed to help him out of boredom, and he thanked her. The students looked at the tall, magnificent-looking young man in bewilderment. Could this really be Artian? Rose petals suddenly began to rain down from above. Rin asked in surprise, "Petals?" Rudd said smugly that someone had done a great job. Yell thought, looking at the petals, "What wonderful magic." Rude approached Lidorsis and said, "Today is a wonderful day. Isn't that so?" Shevla von Hadelio and Anna watched the party from above. Shevla reached for the magic stone on his chest, but Anna said warningly, "Shevla." He said it was pretty boring here, and he invited Anna to come back. Lanoste said that everything was much more interesting than he thought. This means that a special investigative group is being created. The secretary asked if she could look for a suitable candidate, but Lanoste said that it was not necessary. He asked thoughtfully where Schick was now. Schickmoan was near the city when he heard shouts that the Black Mage had appeared there. His eyes lit up. Duchess Artian's carriage moved through the city. The Duchess turned to Lisbon, who was accompanying her. She said that this child had changed. "It looks like that boy from Opian did a good job. She hasn't remembered that child's smile for a long time." She remembered meeting Lidorsis in Helios. She said that she couldn't let him stay there any longer. They could go back now. It wouldn't be a problem. It would be better that way. The Duchess asked if he wanted to return home with her. However, Lidorsis replied that he liked the place. He likes it here in Helios more than ever. There were shouts that the Black Mage had appeared. A little boy in a black cloak declared that he was the most powerful magician in the world. The Black Magician. Shikmona watched as children played magicians and their main character was the Black Magician. Suddenly he heard one townsman tell another that the Sulphur Mage was now in the Roymov shop. He had seen him with his own eyes. The table in the tavern was laden with food. The hosts asked the guest if he really was a black magician. The man in black clothes replied that he was the Black Magician from Opian. Who else could he be? The shop owner's wife said with disappointment that she had been told that the Black Mage was an attractive man. The shop owner said that they were very honored that he visited their shop because he was such an outstanding person. N doesn't have to worry about paying. Let him eat as much as he wants. The owner said that he couldn't believe that the Black Mage had come to their shop. They would get rich. But then a group of suspicious characters entered the shop and asked how he dared to conduct his business without paying them. Their leader said that since he has money, then let him pay. Why on earth did he open there? The owner muttered that he had paid them last week. But the boss said that interest also had to be paid. Just don't say that he has nothing to pay with. If he can't, then let him close his shop. There's such a hole here that it won't even cover half of the debt, but he'll take it right now. The owners turned to the Black Magician for help. They said that they not only come every day and scare away customers. The bandits also force them to borrow money and demand exorbitant interest rates. They are simply a bunch of pathetic swindlers. They can't give them their shop and ask the Black Mage to help them. But the bandit leader only laughed. Who is he trying to deceive? It can't be that the Black Mage would come to such a wreck. He saw the Black Mage himself. The rumors are wrong. In fact, he was no longer young. He was huge as 3 people and very muscular. And this imposter doesn't look like him at all. The owners turned to the man who called himself the Black Magician in confusion, but he remained silent. The leader asked him why he was silent. He probably had nothing to say, that's what he thought. Suddenly, Shikmoni appeared behind the gang leader. The leader received a strong blow and fell. The owners stared in surprise at the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. Shikmone silently stepped on the head of the defeated leader. One of the bandits shouted who he was and where he came from. But he was immediately thrown back by a magical blow. His accomplices soon followed him. Shikmoni stood silently among the fallen bandits. The man who called himself the Black Magician laughed. He told Shikmuni that he was not bad where he would be from. Since he's so cool, he must have seen it somewhere before. Lenoste cursed when he heard the news about Shikmone. He said he couldn't believe he was still chasing him, poor guy. He even felt sorry for him. Lenost asked his interlocutor, calling him a little puppy, where Shik had gone alone. He replied that he had asked him not to call him that, and asked if he knew how piggish Shik had been acting lately. Lenoste replied that of course he knew. The man claiming to be the Black Mage said that he had better introduce himself. and he declared that he was the opium black magician. Shikmone grabbed him by the collar unceremoniously. He dares to say that he is a black mage. No, he's trash. Lanoste's interlocutor asked if something had happened. He said that he had a new mission for Shik. Lanoste named his interlocutor Van, and he said that he would send him to Helios. He ordered Van to bring Shikmone here immediately. The students welcomed Lidorsis warmly. They said that the short haircut suited him very well. He had changed so much. Rude and Dio watched from afar. Dio said he just can't believe they're acting like this just because he changed his image. Maybe he should get a haircut too. Rudd replied that it wasn't just a change of image, but that he was finally given the opportunity. He looked into the yard and saw a group of strangers there. Dio asked what he was looking at. Rudd said that he was seeing these people for the first time. Could these really be new professors? Suddenly it seemed to him that one of the newly arrived people was looking at him. He instantly pulled back from the window, causing Dio to look at him in surprise. Rudd thought that even though he wasn't wearing a robe, it was obvious he was from the tower, and they must have stayed here because of that incident. He decided that it was probably best to stay away from them. The stranger who caught Rude's attention declared that he would now be in charge of this class and said that his name was Orfel. He hopes they get along. After the lesson, Camilla declared that she adored him. She liked this new professor so much. Professor Orfel, since he came here after that incident, he must be really cool. I wonder what rank he has. Rudd wondered how long this professor would be here for. It seemed they were really going to dig up everything connected with that incident. I wonder how much they know. It would be right to tell them everything he knows. But since Professor Hale started it, and if the black figure is still wandering around Helios, there's a high chance that their allies are still inside. I wonder if the master told the Duchess everything. Of course, he must follow his orders for the safety of Lidorsis. Suddenly, Rudd saw that Lidorsis was looking at something strangely. He turned around and saw Isle approaching him. She stated that she needed to talk to him about something. El emphasized that they were alone. The students in the class began to whisper in surprise. Rudd agreed. Dio asked Lidorsis, wondering what they were going to talk about. Rudd brought Isle to the warehouse. She asked with displeasure what this dirty warehouse was, but Rudd replied that there was no other quiet place in the entire school. Yell has resigned herself to it. Then nothing can be done. She asked him what he thought about what had happened. Rudd began to say that he was, of course, shocked that Professor Hale had started this. But Yale interrupted him. She said that it was not about that. He was not there when they were with Professor Hale, but they had probably already told him everything. She said she didn't know about the others, but she noticed something strange about it all. Yale asked him what he thought of Lidorsis. She explained that when Professor Hale turned and Dio fell off the cliff, closest to Dio were Lidorsis and Chevle von Hadelio. Of course, Lidorsis doesn't have as good a relationship with Chevle as he does with Dio, but his connection with Hadelio is still quite deep. Then Professor Hale attacked them and he was aiming at Lidorsis. She thinks he did it on purpose. Rudd listened to her attentively. Eel continued that when Chevle fell, she knew for sure that she saw it. Something was coming from Lidorsis's body, something like black magic. But then the black mage appeared and she thought, Rudd finished for her, that it was his black magic. Isle said that she couldn't get it out of her head. Maybe everything that happened was connected with Lidorsis. She asked Rude what he thought about it, since he was a close person to Lidorsis. Lady Diner asked again. He says that the target of the one who set up all this in Helios could be her son. Can he provide evidence of this? The master replied that, based on what they knew, the threat could not be ruled out. So it would be better to leave the problem unresolved until it was resolved. Lady Diner said it was impossible. She said that during their last meeting, he smiled as if he was overwhelmed with happiness, and she is very grateful to him for making her son smile. The Duchess stated that she wanted to add something to her request. It was necessary to protect her son from any danger. The master answered doubtfully that such a task would be entrusted to a 7th rank mage, but the Duchess said she would pay whatever he asked. He had done a great job so far, and his presence alone would be enough. She also ordered Lispin to immediately go to Helios and join the investigation team. The master assured that he would settle all the formalities necessary for this. The Duchess added that, of course, protecting Lidorsis is more important than any investigation. She also said that it would be better if the tower in Helios did not find out about this. She did not want to ruin Lidorsis's daily life. The master tried to object, but Lady Diner interrupted him and asked him to understand the feelings of a mother who could do nothing. Lanoste stated that it was a gift, pointing to the uniform of a student of the Helios school, Heres. They sat opposite each other with Shikmoon. Lanoste told him to put it on and go to school. Shikmone took the form with a grim look, and he used fire magic. The form immediately turned to ashes. Lanoste said that everything is fine. There is no need to worry. There are 100 more like this. Van, standing behind Shikmun, grinned. Shikmone was outraged at what he was doing. He had completely lost his mind. Lanoste replied that he should ask him. Wasn't it clear that from that day on he had been behaving simply disgustingly? Especially this reckless visit of yours to Opian. While he was hanging around and causing problems, the association's image sank below the plinth. Didn't he himself say that Shikmun can do anything? Shikmone tried to object, but Lanoste hit the table with his palm, causing it to shatter into pieces. Has he forgotten? When he is in front of Lanoste, he obeys his orders. Shikmone asked cheekily, what if he forgot? Shards of glass from the table flew in his direction. One of the fragments hit Van in the forehead, but Shikmone stopped the rest with magic. Shikmone asked what he was doing, completely losing his mind. Lanoste stated that he was leaving and had no choice, because what he is looking for is there. Helios's students watched with interest and surprise as yet another commotion erupted in the school corridor. Professor Orfel sternly asked Professor Rowell why this child. He turned to Rudd and asked his name. He replied that his name was Rudd Christie. He wearily wondered how he had gotten to this point again. After he talked to Isle, he immediately ran into Professor Rowell. And then, to complete the happiness, the professor from the tower showed up, and in one place he ran into two people from whom he was carefully hiding. Professor Orfel sternly asked Professor Rowell why she was bothering Mr. Christie, and she replied that she admired him. Orfel said reproachfully that Tona was chasing him like a savage. Had he done anything wrong? Rowell looked at him darkly. Rudd hoped that she wouldn't say anything unnecessary and tried to somehow hush up the story. Professor Rowell said that he should ignore them and go where he intended to. Professor Orfel said that, of course, she was asking for forgiveness, but she could not decide on the form of speech. She now seriously told him to stay away and not interfere. Rudd thought that was exactly what she had told him and decided that it was time for him to go. Then Professor Khan appeared, loudly calling for Orfel and Rowell. He saw them and asked what they were doing there. Did they miss the call? Everyone is already waiting. They should hurry. Professor Orfel suggested that Rowell continue the conversation another time. And they left, following Professor Khan. Rudd breathed a sigh of relief. Then Dio rushed at him and asked how everything went, what he and Isle talked about. Rudd replied that they hadn't really talked about anything and became lost in thought. He recalled their conversation. Then he replied that he had no idea what she was talking about. Maybe she was just mistaken. Yell replied that it was possible. But then she stated that since he was so stubbornly silent, she definitely saw something coming from Lidorsus's body. Lidorsus slept in their room. Rudd looked at him and thought that he couldn't get it out of his head. He decided he'd just check it out just in case. Rudd placed his palm on Lidorsus's forehead and activated his mark. He examined Lidorsus's aura, not noticing that streams of black magic appeared above them. Rudd thought with relief that he knew it. There was nothing. But suddenly it seemed to him that he noticed something strange, that's it. He threw back the blanket and opened Lidorsus's shirt, looking at his chest. He thought the mark must be somewhere here. Where is she? But then Lidorsus woke up, and he looked at Rudd with a wild gaze. Rudd said he felt hot. He walked away, leaving Lidorsus in bewilderment, and went to bed. He wondered why he felt a magical mark on Lidorsus. Headmistress Helios announced that a new mage would be joining them at the request of Duchess Artian. In addition, the association will also send its own person here. Theon was indignant. What nonsense! It was none of their business. So why were they interfering? One of the council members stated that if this is an association, maybe they really will be of some use. They have no shortage of talent. The mage from Orfel Tower said that it depends on who exactly they send. They don't happen to know who will come to them. The director thought, remembering the name. When Shikmone left, Van asked Lanoste if the Black Mage was really in Helios. He replied that of course not. He was last seen in Ishuel. After that incident, the school contacted him. But he is silent, so there is no way he can be in Helios. Van asked how they would get out of this then. Lanoste said that he had some strange feeling. His intuition told him that something grandiose would soon happen there. Since Sheik can't disobey Lanost, he will definitely do what he asked him to do, although they will have a lot of trouble if the Black Mage appears there. And who did he take after? Any interest turns into an obsession for him. Let's hope he's not there. Because if the Black Mage is really there, then they'll be lucky if the school isn't razed to the ground. Theon was loudly indignant about the arrival of a mage from the association. It was simply absurd. He said that when he remembers what they did 3 years ago in Ocarina, his teeth still grind with anger. He's willing to bet that that damned Lanost of theirs is up to something again. Otherwise, it is simply unthinkable that Gellis would accept help from some psychos. Orphle suddenly told Theon to speak more quietly. At the end of the gallery, a human figure appeared. It was a student in the uniform of Carace. Theon asked Orphle if he knew this student. Orphle said, "How many years, how many winters? The last time they saw each other was in the Imperial Palace. He did not expect to meet him here." Orphle added that in any case, he was glad to see him and extended his hand for a handshake. However, student Carace ignored him and walked past silently. Theon was indignant. What an impudent fellow, who was he anyway, such a rude man? Orphle replied that he had arrived faster than he expected. It was Shikmone from the association. Theon was surprised, Shikmone, but he is a magician. Orphle said that Theon still has a lot of growing to do. Shikmon uses a magical artifact. Normal magicians wouldn't even notice it. It looks like some kind of mind control. He wondered why the hell Chairman Lanaste had sent this particular guy here. The professor said that all magicians receive a new name at the moment of their first awakening. They wear it for the rest of their lives. It is called a magical name. This system is constantly criticized because they are not free to choose their own magical name. During the lesson, Lidorsus looked at Rude strangely. Rudd wondered why. Oh, why couldn't he say anything? Finally, the lesson ended and the students went out for a walk. Rudd approached Lidorsus and said that he had misunderstood everything. He took off his clothes at night not to grope him or do anything like that. He did it because he was looking for something. Rudd asked if he by any chance felt anything strange, changes in his body, something like a missing mark. Lidorsus replied in surprise that no, he didn't feel anything like that. Rudd wondered if Lidorsus really knew anything. A group of people walked through the grounds of the Helios school. The professor said that the school was quite large and suggested that his companion come here. Shikmone followed him silently. Two students were watching them. One of them asked the other if he saw it. It was Carice's uniform. "What's going on? The first day in Helios and already Carace. This is completely normal. No matter how noble he is, he will not tolerate this."